Good morning and welcome to another episode of your favorite weekend current affairs and political discussion show, The Big Issue. My name is Godfred Akoto-Boafo and I am your host. And in this week, there has been just one significant topic. If you look at it, the front page of the Daily Guide describes it best. Cabinet holds crunch meeting on economy. And this has been going on since Thursday. Several questions have arisen over the state of Ghana's economy. A struggling currency, soaring fuel prices, soaring food prices, inflation. Nothing seems to be working for the government, and they seem to have finally decided that a meeting to judge or share ideas might be the solution. On the other side, you have the minority side who are pushing IMF or not to go to IMF. The government seems quite clear in its mind that an IMF solution is not part of their agenda. In fact, they have said that yesterday as one of the outcomes that came out of the first day of the Crunch Cabinet meeting. So we'll try and go through what options there are for the government as they meet to try and figure out a way from what looks like one of the most difficult economic situations this country has faced in a very, very long time. I have a high-powered panel to do justice to that. I will also spend a few minutes discussing a question of law that has come up in the past few weeks. I'll spend about 20 minutes or so looking at the implications of that Supreme Court ruling. We've heard quite a few views, but this week there's an interesting alternate view that has come from Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare, a CDD fellow on law and justice, that I want to just spend about 20 or 30 minutes on, and then we will spend the rest of the time looking at how to salvage the Ghanaian economy, because that looks to be what we are on now, a salvage mission. So over the next 3 hours or so, a lot to look forward to on The Big Issue. Welcome back to The Big Issue, and as always, you know it's an interactive show, so I have two WhatsApp lines for you. You can join the program 0549 986 996, 0550 585 Let me take that a bit slowly. 0549 986 996 and 0550 585 You can tell me what your thoughts are on the economy. It's a question we've been asking, but those of us at the end of policy, how are you feeling, and what are your thoughts on the government meeting its cabinet, meeting MPs, meeting other stakeholders? And well, that's also a question we need to ask. Are there other stakeholders, in fact, invited to this cabinet retreat to discuss the economy? You share your thoughts with us on the WhatsApp lines. You can also join us on Twitter using the hashtag The Big Issue. The hashtag is The Big Issue. City973 is the handle, or you can reach me on at East Sportsman. I will gladly read your comments. Also on Facebook, City973 and City TV GH. We're streaming live. You can leave your comments there and do share. And if you do miss out, don't worry, go to our YouTube channel, CityTube, CITITUBE, and we will take, you can just type the Big Issue in, catch a playback. But most importantly, when you are there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Very important. So with that out of the way, like I said, the main discussion is on the economy. But this week I chanced upon an interesting opinion from Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare. And the reason why this is interesting is because last week I spent quite a bit of time discussing the Supreme Court ruling on the Justice Abdullahi case. And this week we have been told that Justice Abdullahi says he will seek a review at the Supreme Court of that ruling. He's not satisfied. We had heard the Speaker of Parliament also write on the matter. The former president had written on the matter, John Dramani Mahama. The sitting president had also spoken on the matter, and it's a matter that has split hairs. But we seemed to, from the non-political side at least, we seemed to hear a lot of agreement with the bench and how they interpreted it. To hear from Professor H. Kwesi Brempe, for instance, who said constitutionally the ruling was sound. But then this week we heard from another person who spends a lot of time studying the Ghanaian law, paying attention to it, and he shared an interesting opinion on this matter. Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare, like I said, CDD Fellow for Law and Justice. Good morning, Prof. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
Hello, Prof. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I see you're already in the weekend vibe, looking very, very sharp this morning.
Yes, absolutely. It's only 5 o'clock in the morning here.
Anyway, let's get quickly to the thrust of the matter. A lot of academics, and I'm keeping this in that space, have seemed to agree with the ruling of the Supreme Court, acknowledging they are sticking with the letter of the law. There are those who have disagreed and said there should have been a purposive interpretation, but they sticking with a literal translation of the law seems to have gone down well with quite a large section of academia. You, however, hold a different opinion. What are your points of divergence?
Well, thank you. There are many, in fact. The only thing I like about the opinion is that it's well written and it is timely. Beyond that, everything about the opinion is, in my opinion, flawed. Look, even if you wanted to take a literal interpretation of the Constitution, you wouldn't have gotten the result that they got, because the most literal reading of the Constitution is that the Speaker does not have a casting or original vote. And then you go to Article 295(2)(a), and Article 295(2)(a) basically says, look, when we refer to somebody by his office, then everything that applies to that somebody would apply to somebody who is acting as a deputy or assistant in the same function, in performing the same function. So when you read the Speaker does not have an original or casting vote, it also means the Deputy Speaker does not have an original or casting vote, or any member presiding, because as long as you are playing the function of the Speaker, then you don't have an original or casting vote. So that is the most literal interpretation. If you wanted to read the Constitution holistically and apply it literally, you just look at the article on what the Speaker can do and cannot do, and then you go to Article 295(2)(a), and the issue is resolved. But you can do even better than that, because I believe when you are interpreting the Constitution, what you are trying to do is to try to understand what was driving the people who wrote the Constitution. If you did that, then you go to the legislative history. And if you go to the legislative history and you review where we came from 1957, in fact, in 1957, there was a specific language in our Constitution which says a deputy speaker retains his original vote, but he doesn't have a casting vote. And that particular clause, the deputy speaker retained his original vote, was passed as an act in 1965, Act 300, repeats the same thing. So when we have the Constitutional Commission, the President Akufo-Addo, not the current President Akufo-Addo, but his dad, he presided or chaired the commission that proposed articles for the 1969 Constitution. They proposed that we retain the language in the 1957 Constitution about the Deputy Speaker, as well as the 1965 Act. And that proposal was considered by the Constituent Assembly, and the Constituent Assembly explicitly rejected that. And the same thing happened in 1979, and the same thing happened in 1992. That is why the Deputy Speaker language that gives him an original vote disappeared from our Constitution. So when you use what we call the subjective purposive approach, that is what is in the mind of the framers, the inescapable conclusion that you come up with is that somebody presiding does not have an original vote. Then there's also what we call the objective purposive approach. In other words, when you look at the values of the Constitution, what exactly is the prudent and optimal way that we organize ourselves? In that realm, you tend to see that whoever presides as a speaker, even though he's a member of parliament, wield substantive authority over other members. And that authority that he wields is coextensive with his being impartial, at least in appearance. Given that power that he temporarily holds as the speaker pro tempore, then it is expected that he would not be able to participate in the debates like an ordinary member or vote like an ordinary member. So on that objective, purposive ground as well, you reach the same conclusion that the deputy speaker does not have an original vote. Then you can look around the world like the Supreme Court tried to do. They looked at Kenya, they look at Botswana, they look at UK, they look at Canada, they look at Australia. And when you put it all together, the trend worldwide is that somebody who is presiding is not given an original vote. And so that adds to the proper conclusion being reached, which is a deputy speaker does not vote. Now, these are all analysis. Let's also just look at even the practicality of the ruling. Number one, you say that the deputy speaker must be counted in the quorum and can vote. Let's just go to the voting. What exactly is the voting that he's talking about? He says he must take part in the decision. Well, that is so broad that it doesn't help me. Parliament makes so many decisions. Everything that Parliament does is a decision. Is the Supreme Court saying from now on, every decision that Parliament would have to make will have to meet a quorum for voting? That is impractical. That almost is a court that doesn't understand how parliamentary works. One reason why Justice Sowa says when it comes to Parliament, their laws are aliens to the court, and the court step aside from trying to rule over what they do. Number two, even if we grant that there's a decision that has to be made and the deputy speaker should take part in it, well, how does he take part? Most decisions in the Parliament are made by voice vote. Is the Supreme Court saying that the person who is presiding, who is supposed to be paying attention to the yeas and the nays and deciding whether the yeas and the nays have it, should wear an MP hat and also be shouting yay while he's still listening for who is the loudest? That's impractical. And if the deputy speaker cannot take part in the yea versus no vote, and a division is called, a division is like a recount. If you did not take part in the preceding voice vote, you are not allowed to take part in the division, because the division is not a new vote. It is just somebody complaining that the voice vote was not properly counted, and so let's go to a division. And so a deputy speaker who did not take part in a voice vote cannot be said to be taking part in a division.
But Prof, just to what then becomes, I understand the point you are trying to make, that the Supreme Court perhaps should have looked at the logic of how does somebody who's supposed to be, so the impartiality of the person presiding is what should have held sway. But then the question of representation also comes in this regard, where those who support it then say, what becomes of the ultimate objective of representation of somebody who has been voted as an MP? And for the purposes of our Constitution right now, the deputy speakers are both sitting MPs. where then does their ultimate obligation of representation go? Why should they lose that simply because of the fact that they have become a deputy speaker presiding?
Because it is really a stretched point. Now, we are talking about a parliament that is going to make thousands of decisions, and there are very few cases when a deputy speaker is presiding. And so when you look at the number of cases that will be implicated by this presiding of a deputy member and weigh it against the value of impartiality, it is not even a contest. Number two, the deputy speaker wields other power even when he's not presiding. By reason of being a deputy speaker, he chairs so many committees. So people from a constituency that have a deputy speaker actually ends up benefiting than those from constituencies who do not have a deputy speaker. Now, when you look at the constitution itself, the constitution disqualifies a member of parliament if the member of parliament has a contract that is being considered by parliament or has an interest in a contract that is being considered by parliament. The constitution says, well, you cannot vote. Well, why? Isn't he representing a constituency? If he's representing a constituency, why should that whole constituency be disenfranchised, to use your term, merely because the MP himself or herself does not have a vote? Look at ministers. We appoint a lot of ministers from parliament, and the implication of being appointed as a minister in parliament is you are almost like a part-time MP, because most of the time or half of the time you are not even in parliament. I don't hear constituents complaining that, hey, we sent our MPs there to go and represent us. Why is he up there as the Northern Regional Minister or as the Gender Minister, and so on and so forth? I think this is one of the most exaggerated reasons that you can think of. It has no basis as a constitutional matter. It is just brought in. It's a political argument. It's not a legal argument. So that makes no sense whatsoever.
You've also expressed dissatisfaction with Parliament itself not being allowed to make representation at when this case was being heard by the Supreme Court. I've also heard those who say, well, Parliament was aware, the Speaker had addressed this issue and in fact had said on the floor of Parliament that they were all awaiting the ruling of the Supreme Court. And so they should also have known that, well, if this is what is happening, perhaps we can also go in and tie ourselves in to this case. So why blame the Supreme Court for this?
Again, that is not a legal argument because, number one, everybody understands that courts should not try people or institutions or body in absentia. If you are going to make a decision that affects somebody's interest, at a minimum, you have to hear what that person has to say. So that is a fundamental concept that nobody has to argue with. We accept that as a matter of equity and as a matter of justice. Number two, our courts have held time and again that a person who is not a party to a litigation cannot invite himself to the dance. In other words, unless you are the plaintiff or you are the defendant, you cannot go to the court and say, court, I want to take part. The only people who can join a party is the party itself and the court on its own volition or on its own motion, what some people call the court suo motu. So even if Parliament was aware that this was going on, Parliament had no basis or path to invite itself to the proceedings. It was up to the court to look at the issues and decide that the equities of this case, for full justice to be done, considering that the Attorney General, who normally represents state institutions, have an interest that is adverse to Parliament, then we want Parliament to be heard. More so, Parliament is not just anybody, but it is a co-equal branch of government. So as a matter of institutional committee alone, the court should have invited Parliament to be heard. And if the court invited Parliament to be heard, many of the mistakes that are in the ruling would probably not have arisen. For instance, decision made. One of the issues is whether the deputy speaker has to be counted in the quorum for decisions or can take part in the decisions. Such a broad issue, no reasonable court will answer such a broad issue. You have to be a little more specific, because decisions are so wide that if you give a general ruling that the deputy speaker can be counted in the quorum for a decision, does that mean if we are making a decision as to whether or not we should approve yesterday's the minutes of yesterday's meeting, there should be a quorum and the deputy speaker should be counted? I mean, that doesn't work. Now, let me also indicate the conceptual flaw in the court's biggest argument. The court's biggest argument was the difference between Article 102 and Article 1041.
Yes.
Now, Article 102 is the quorum in Parliament, and Article 1041 is the voting in Parliament. If you don't understand what I just said, then you will go the path of the court and make all types of mistakes. The Article 102 quorum serves two purposes. Number one, it tells us the minimum turnout of MPs before business of the House can commence. That's number one. And that minimum turnout, given the current number, is 92. Second, and more important, it tells us who is eligible to be counted when we are determining this quorum. And in that, it says anyone presiding cannot be counted, because the quorum, the counting, is only of the floor members, the people actually on the floor who can do business. So that establishes that anytime we have to count for purposes of determining a quorum, if a member is presiding, if a member is wearing the hat of a speaker, he cannot be counted. So that's Article 102. Then you go to Article 104. Article 104 has a limited use, because it is saying that what should happen in the business of voting. In the business of voting, it basically says in the business of voting, number one, we are going to consider an issue as accepted or as prevailing if 50% plus one of the people who are present and voting vote for the issue. Number two, in order to avoid a situation where a minority group is oppressing a majority group, the minimum turnout for purposes of voting is going to be at least half. That is 138. It doesn't say anything about who should belong to the 138. No, the voting in Parliament doesn't talk about eligibility. It just talks about turnout and the decision rule for making decisions. Now, who do we count when we are considering this question of who can vote? Well, you go back to the article on quorum in Parliament, because you are making a decision as regard quorum in Parliament. That is why 104 says that, except as stated in this Constitution. So it's reminding you that relate back to 102 when you want to know who should be counted. And if you go to 102 resolves that the deputy speaker is not counted. Look, it is very similar to this whole question of a referendum. When we are going to have a referendum on creating a region or something like that, if you look at the article relating to the referendum and deciding whether the issue has been carried, it gives you some threshold. It says, well, number one, at least 60% of the people must show up, and number two, of the 60% who show up, about 85% must vote before the issue is carried. That is the only purpose of Article 104.1. It tells us the minimum number of people who should be there before we can vote on an issue. And then number two, once we vote, how do we determine whether or not the issue has carried? It doesn't say anything about who is eligible to be counted. To know who is eligible to be counted, it has to go back to quorum in Parliament, Article 102. The court completely misunderstands the architecture and then somehow says, because the 102 says that the deputy the deputy speaker or the presiding member cannot be counted, but 104.1 doesn't say the deputy speaker cannot be counted, then it follows that the framers did not care whether the deputy speaker was excluded from deliberations, but they wanted the deputy speaker to vote. This is complete. I mean, I'm flabbergasted by that line of reasoning. It's completely flawed, illogical. There's no saving grace to that line of thinking, especially when there's an easy way to resolve this question by looking at Article 295.2a, which says anybody performing the functions of the speaker should be treated as the speaker himself. So all the respect that you give to the speaker, give to the deputy speaker when he wears the hat of the speaker. If the speaker cannot vote, you, the person presiding, cannot vote. So I'm afraid that me and anyone reading the Constitution carefully, you cannot agree with this decision, and it's going to cause confusion. And fundamentally, the court itself should not have been involved. Because let me go to another issue that they resolved. They said the budget was properly approved. That's they are holding on the third issue.
Yeah, the third relief.
I mean, what the third issue? Yeah, it's one of the reliefs, but they frame it as the third issue. I don't even know why a court is interested in answering this question, because it's a moot question. Whether the budget is approved or not approved, appropriations have been made already and people are moving on. So what exactly is the court doing by trying to say the budget was approved when the court does not actually consider the full set of facts? Because there were two approvals and the court is only talking about one approval. You have to understand the first approval before you can go to the second approval. You have to address whether the first approval was proper. If the first approval was proper, maybe the second approval was not even needed. You have to address the issue of whether, if the substantive speaker makes a ruling on an issue, the deputy speaker on another day can overturn that ruling. There are so many issues that require resolution before any serious person can say the budget has been approved or not. And in any event, it is a moot question. Why answer a question that has no consequence? The budget has been approved or not approved. Appropriations are being made. Any court will say this is moot. We don't have the full complement of facts. We are not going to get ourselves involved in this.
Let me ask you a final question on this. Now, my colleague, who's also a lawyer, sends in this one, and just your thoughts. Now, on Parliament Act 1965, Act 300, Section 14, that deals with voting, one says, subject to the provisions of this or any other act, or all questions proposed for decisions in the Assembly shall be determined by a majority of the votes of the members present and voting. And if upon any question before the Assembly, the votes of the members are equally divided, the motion shall be lost. Then 2, the Speaker shall have neither an original nor a casting vote, but any other person presiding, including a deputy speaker, shall have an original vote, but no casting vote. Now, on the Section 2, this is an act that regulates Parliament and perhaps addressed the issue at hand. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I explained this already. This is, remember, the 1965 Act, of course, an act an act does not control a constitution. And then, more important than the act that he sent, I also explained that even in the 1957 constitution, what you just read about the deputy speaker was in the constitution itself. So there is a history of that. And the fact that we've had this specific language in the constitution and in the statute, this is what I explained. And also the fact that this specific language was proposed by the not Nana Akufo-Addo, the President Edward Akufo-Addo Commission. It was proposed in 1968, but the Constituent Assembly that ultimately framed the Constitution rejected that. It says, no, that belongs to 1957 and that belongs to 1965. We haven't had good experience with it. We don't want it. And that's why it is no longer in the Constitution. So this person bringing the 1965 Act is not showing anything magic. I've already explained that we had it in our Constitution, and having it in the Constitution is even more authoritative than having it in the statute in 1965 at a time when we had a one-party state. Clearly, a 1965 statute has no consequence for interpreting the 1992 Constitution. Beyond telling us that the framers knew about this architecture, considered it, and actively rejected it. And that is why we have had the Standing Order 1093 for 30 years, because all of the people in Parliament, they are very good lawyers in there. They know the rules. This rule has been there. One of the reasons they haven't touched it is because they know the history. And it's because they know that a person who is sitting presiding over other MPs cannot be partial. And one final point, you say some of the people say, well, it's not fair that our constituency is not being represented when we have a deputy speaker who is presiding. Well, go to the other constituencies. They are also complaining that it is not fair that an MP, an ordinary MP, would be making would be overruling their MP, because that's what you have, the power that somebody presiding has over other MPs. You are just an ordinary MP, but you have been temporarily elevated to act almost as a headmaster of the other MPs. Well, if I'm in another constituency, I can say, well, that's not fair. So that those type of arguments are not really legal or constitutional arguments. They are just thrown out there, similar to what we hear, rules are rules. When we had this Achimota case and people were saying the person cannot wear Rasta hair, then you hear all these slogans, rules are rules, and so on. Here they are saying Parliament is not about the law. Nobody is saying Parliament is about the law. All we are saying is that the Constitution should be properly interpreted with an understanding of the history and with respect to the words in the Constitution, i.e., read the part on the Speaker in conjunction with the Article 295 2A, which tells you a deputy is considered as a Speaker. And yes, if you look at the opinion, one mistake that is glaring is the court makes reference to the Kenyan situation, and it says in Kenya, the Speaker cannot vote, but the Deputy Speaker can vote. Well, wrong, because if you read the Kenya Constitution in totality, it tells you that the Deputy Speaker is treated the same way as the Speaker. So to me, again, I want to emphasize that the decision is very well written. I appreciate that, but the logic is totally flawed.
Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Kwaku-Asare, this morning, sharing his dissent with the Supreme Court's ruling a week ago. I'm sure that adds to the conversation that has been had, and I hope he's also provided a different perspective. I find it his thoughts on a division not being a new vote very instructive. And
what does it mean? A division is not.
No, basically he's saying that once you've done a division follows a voice vote. So you cannot count a division as a new vote. It's simply a
It's to confirm the voice vote.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what the point
to
is
confirm
making.
the
So
voice
if you do
vote.
not
His
take part,
argument is that
if you do not take part in a
How
voice
then
vote,
do you
how
take part in the
part
decision?
Yes,
Because the
what
division is
strategy
simply
would
to tell the speaker, we think you didn't hear it well. That's all about division.
Yes.
The division comes after a voice vote. The speaker then says, I think the ayes have it. Then a member rises and says, Speaker, no, with the greatest of respect, we believe you didn't hear it well. So let's authenticate the voice vote. That is where a division comes in. Now, the speaker did not participate in the voice vote.
Yes.
So if you are authenticating the voice vote, how then does the speaker then come in to vote?
Interesting. And that
it's
means
been the most
member of
telling
parliament. Hold on,
argument I've
Joe.
heard so far.
Member of parliament for Yape Kusogu.
I'm sorry, you haven't even introduced me.
Yes, introduce yourself. Member of parliament for Yape Kusogu has introduced himself, as has Joe Jackson, Director of Business Operations at Daylight Finance. They have decided to introduce themselves. I'll allow it. Good morning, John. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good.
Pleasure to have you here. I know it's not been easy getting here this morning. I appreciate and my listeners also appreciate the efforts you've made to be here this morning. Joe as well. I know you had some pressing matters, but you made time for us as always. So I appreciate it a lot.
Good to be here anyway.
Yeah.
And it was interesting listening to the...
Oh, very, very
Yes. Daniel
intelligent
Ochema
analysis.
is also with us via Zoom. Dr. Bwaji, good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We are doing well. I can see you're in a very good mood this morning. And then...
John, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good meeting. I miss you. my former member of the finance committee.
Yes. And then...
Take it easy.
Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa, is also with us as always. Franklin, good morning. Dr. Ejapoma Jekedakun, I hope I pronounced that right. Senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, also with us. Doc, did I pronounce your name right? Doc, can you please unmute your microphone? Thank you.
Good morning to you. Yes, you did.
Oh, okay.
It's Ejapoma Jekedakun.
Yes, I have done well. Thank you for joining us on the big issue this morning. Toma Amia will also join us at some point. But let me start the conversation from Joe, and I want to begin the whole conversation on finance and the economy right now, top of the mind of everybody. And at the moment, the president's top of his mind as well, because he's engaged in a crunch meeting. I think it started Thursday, some are reporting Friday, where he's meeting members of parliament, he's meeting his EMT, he's meeting cabinet ministers. Why were you not invited, John?
No, I'm not part of that.
No, I mean, I thought they were proffering ideas, solutions for the economy.
I couldn't have been.
Okay,
We
so-
meet the minister at finance, so we make our points known to
All right, no problem.
the minister.
They're supposed to prefer solutions to other pressing economic conditions. So we're talking about the currency and rising fuel prices, what to do with that. Joe, I will start with you. You've been saying for a long time, you've been saying for 2 years now, that
More than 2 years.
that this was coming, and here we are. We know how we got here. What to do now? First of all, you work with money, the currency. That seems to be the biggest headache, the depreciating cedi. What to do?
Well, I think first of all, just my thoughts.
Yes.
I'm surprised that we are surprised because it's been happening. And anybody who's been reading the tea leaves should have known that the chickens would have come home to roost. But in respect of the depreciating city, here's my argument. We have to diagnose the cause so that we can proffer the right solution. Now, let's be clear. I, from where I sit, don't think that there's been a sudden demand for goods and services that has caused the city to depreciate. Why do I say so? A few weeks ago, we had the Chinese New Year. Mm-hmm. In the run-up to the Chinese New Year, the factories shut down. After that, they also shut down for a few days so that their workers can have a holiday. They use that traditionally for maintenance. Mm-hmm. And because of the knock-on effect, even other factories in other countries also kind of shut down because of the just-in-time, the supply chain, etc. That is traditionally in our country the time of the lowest demand for the cedi, right? Because our cedi is usually going to buy goods, services. Guess what happened this year? It was skyrocketing. It was running away. This was Chinese New Year, was on 1st of February this year. So what happened? Now, if you rewind, a few weeks before that had been our downgrade. A couple of weeks before that had been that cascading downgrade of our debt. Right? By the rating agencies.
Yeah.
Now, think about it. One of the reasons why our cedi was so stable was what was considered in those times a fantastic thing to do, which is sell cedi paper, but sell it to people who bring dollars in. Right? And that was the whole genesis of the Franklin Templeton and its related matters. Now, if you think about it, so cedis, dollars were coming in, keeping the cedi stable. They were not crowding out investment, so the interest rates actually kept falling. So for 2017 onwards, all is good and things are great.
So what's sound policy?
Sound policy.
I'm asking, what's sound policy?
Yes, under the circumstances of sound policy.
Okay.
You can't hang me when things go wrong and hang me when things go right. Except for one thing. Because you were dependent on people bringing their money in to stabilize your cedi, keep your interest rates low, you must keep your eye on what those people think. So, as our cedi was suffering, our debt was being downgraded, you should realize that you have put that policy that was sound at that time at risk. So when the downgrade happened, of course, people who were holding your debt just look at it and say, Ghana, it's not good though. We are not happy. Oh. In any case, it also coincided with the US Treasury's also rates coming up. So there's now, they rebalance their portfolio, they dump your cedi, buy dollars under their armpit and fly it out. Then your cedi crashes. Then,
So
well, hold on.
No, I'm just saying it so that people understand where
Yes.
you're going. So you're saying that what started out as sound strategy at a point failed us,
Yes,
and we
and
did not respond.
It was triggered by the downgrade of our debt. So
But the downgrade was triggered by something.
Yes, so one of the things we should have done when you're asking people to bring it in is always keep in mind what is happening to my debt. How are people seeing it? Am I still be able to repay? Because that is the crux of what has been one of your most successful policies in that time. When they downgraded it, it triggered it and people started. Then we got into a vicious cycle where as the cedi was depreciating, now even local holders of cedi are now want to hold dollar. So that vicious cycle kept on fueling itself. And at this moment, this issue is on a runaway and we have to put a stop to it. So first of all, you got to understand, how do we stop this? Your first issue is how do I bring in confidence into those international markets, those who are holding Ghana's debt, to say that, okay, Ghana is fixing its problems seriously. I beg to say this, that any attempt to support this issue by just dumping dollar into the market may actually fuel it. Yes, what I think should happen is that let's agree on how do we get confidence back into the market. Because what is happening is a lack of confidence in Ghana's economic management.
Yes, so how do we do that? What are your options?
Your options are very simple. Slash your expenditure.
20%. Government says they're doing that.
For one quarter, not good enough. If you're slashing 20%,
20% of what?
of it has to cut out. And in any case, there's no money. We haven't gone to the Eurobond. And remember, To add to this, remember that every first quarter, Eurobond money comes in, keeps us all nice and happy and smiling.
It didn't
That
come
money
this year.
last quarter, it didn't come. This quarter, shit.
Why?
Of course, because of the conditions were poor. And why were the conditions poor? Because of the downgrade. So you see how all the issues multiply and come together. Then
Hold on. On the downgrade. Hold on.
Okay.
I know I'm being a bit.
No,
but
that's
we are
fine.
just trying to explain things because we've had responses. We had responses from the state when the downgrades came.
Yes.
They did not agree. They felt that things were in order.
But you see, it is not what you say that matters. Somebody is sitting out there, right? His whole role is to be independent and judge you, right? And he says, I don't think things are right with you. I think at this moment you've borrowed too much. I think your ability to pay is severely impaired. Standing up and shouting that you are lying, you are new to this, you don't understand, it doesn't help because the people who are listening are not listening to your voice, they are listening to that other voice. You understand me? And especially when the response was a bit strident, at some level, even attacking the personality of the lead on that team. I thought it wasn't an appropriate response, considering how much all of us depended on that policy that you had that was working so well. You go and you take an exam, right? And then you fail. You say, you didn't mark my script right. Then you attack the personality of the WAEC examiners. I think it's a bit, just state your case, say, listen, maybe we should go for a remark, do this. But it's a tough one. So you got to understand that right now, anything we do must be on the basis of, I would judge how successful this whole process is on how we can reassure the markets that Ghana is on the right track.
On the cutting expenditure, I heard from the IEA some solutions this weekend. I don't know what you think. So, for instance, Dr. John Kwachi says, restructure ministries and reduce the number from 30 to 20. Reduce the number of ministers from 86 to 56, including regional ministers. Slash executive pay by 20%. Enforce the announced 20% reduction of MDA's budgets. Introduce government parent cost-sharing arrangement for the free senior high school policy. Abolish purchase of exam questions, scrap NAPCO, freeze allowances for nursing and teacher trainees, impose a temporary freeze on recruitment into the public service. Somebody will say, all these sound good, but there are political repercussions to some of these things. There's political economics.
Yeah. First of all, let's be clear. Some of the items you have to deal with are to deal with the issue of, let's see that you're also sharing in the pain. They might
So it's
not
about
in
perception.
quantum reduce the whole budget by that much. But let's make sure that you agree you are also sharing in the pain. So I put that slashing salaries, etc. in that category of sharing in the pain. That is for the visual and the perception. But really, we have to address some of the huge items that are on the budget. And the biggest single item is free SHS. Outside salaries and interest payments, what are the other things that come up? You see, we can't reduce salaries.
But it's the one also with the biggest political cost.
Yes.
The SHS.
But even by law, you can't reduce my salary.
Yes.
You can find a way to get rid of me, but you can't reduce my salary. As for interest payments, not anything, any action makes the whole situation worse. So, and that's why, in a sense, you got to understand that interest payments by salaries are adding up to over 100% at this moment of all our revenue. At this moment. So, slash expenditure properly.
And the first one for you,
Take
obvious,
an
is free
axe
SHS.
to the expenditure.
Number one is free SHS for you.
It has to be. All those consumption-based items have to go.
But I'm also saying, it's easy to, you are a money man, but I'm saying for the politician who has made these promises and has delivered on them.
That is why I like the idea that they're declaring a crisis. That's if they have declared a crisis yet. Because we are in a crisis.
Well, you're holding a
situation.
crunch meeting.
Well,
that's the only way.
I don't know whether they said it's a crunch meeting. First of all, I have a few issues. All options should be on the table. I'm uncomfortable with ruling out IMF, even at this stage.
It has been ruled out by the president. It has been ruled out twice by the finance
That's
minister.
my point. Don't rule any option now. If the situation is as dire as some of us see it, and now the evidence is there. When you go to the pump, you see evidence. When you go to buy dollar, you see the evidence that the situation is there. It's not somebody sitting somewhere saying Ghana is broke. We all have accepted now Ghana is broke has been mainstreamed. Even the Minister of Finance is saying it. So there's evidence that the situation is dire. And it's going to get worse, not better. So this
What do
is
you mean by worse?
Well, the prices of oil is not coming down. The Ukraine event is not. You see, there's a certain conflation of events. Ukraine, the U.S. treasuries are even going up higher. So the dumping may even take place more, right? You've heard last week, the U.S. treasuries are going up. There'll be a little bit more dumping. The Ukraine war doesn't seem to be at an end, right? There's a rapprochement proposed between China and the U.S., which doesn't bode well for Russia. But under the circumstances, it means that whole thing is going to be extended. The price of a barrel of oil may go up. Things could get worse. Things could get a lot worse. So, this is a time for consensus building. This is a time for leadership. We need a man of the moment. This is, if at this time we can't put our partisan politics behind, then the last person out should put off the light.
But before I get to John, and John will tell you, well, you voted for somebody to make those decisions. So what do you need him for?
We need him to build consensus. We need them to drop some of their more strident demands and to sit down at the table and say, Charlie, there's a problem. Oh, let's fix this. Let's fix it for Ghana.
But we've heard some of the solutions you've preferred. Those solutions have come from, and we'll hear from John. The government seems also fixated on, it's a matter of differing economic ideology at a point sometimes, isn't it?
I don't think so. I actually believe that economic ideology on both sides of the divide is actually remarkably uniform.
On this matter?
Not just this matter, all matters. What differs is a slight change in nuance here and there, and if somebody jumps on a certain boat first, then I have to be in the opposition. But it's take free SHS. Has it not been advocated for on both sides of the divide? And if the path we are on is not sustainable, shouldn't we both sit down and find a sustainable path? The problem is that as soon as we do that, somebody is going to declare victory. Then we have a problem.
Okay.
So the solution, just to wrap this up, the solution is not, please, and Bank of Ghana, I beg, don't just go and pump in more money. The solution is bringing everybody to the table to say, how do we slash costs? How do we increase revenue? Please, this is not going to be solved only by slashing costs. It's going to be, because remember that if you take salaries and what do you call interest payments, you've reached 100%. So this you've got to find new ways of growing the tax net and dealing with it now.
E-levy.
You said it, I didn't. Because I've been hammered for being a proponent of the e-levy. Simply because I believe that the situation is so dire that every little counts, including the e-levy. Even though the e-levy has a potential of hitting me so hard, I don't know how my business is going to move forward.
But they also have expressed concern about And we heard that last week, for instance, when the roads minister, I don't know whether it was a slip or whether he meant to say it on the floor of Parliament, that the e-levy could be collateralized.
You see, listen.
Was that part of, is that prudent? Does it make sense?
At this moment, listen, anything can be collateralized. Any revenue stream can be collateralized. So for me, it's neither here nor there. We've collateralized the GET fund, haven't we? So why can't we? We've collateralized the...
but that's piling more debt.
SLAB.
But that's piling more debt.
But so hold on. The issue is this, right? Slash cost, but also increase revenue. This thing, we're not going to do it without pain. No. There's going to be pain.
Somebody has to lose.
Somebody has to lose. But in all things, Ghana has to win.
All right. Joe Jackson on that. We'll hear from John Jinapa. I'm going to take a quick break so that he has enough. I don't want you to start it, then I'll break. Then
he's been writing for the last 5 minutes.
And then I will bring in
his guns are ready to fire.
I will bring in Franklin and Dr. Japuma Jekedaku from the University of Ghana Business School as well to share their thoughts. Like I said, Toma Meya will come in at some point. Daniel Ochema Boaje, former member of the Finance Committee as well. So the big issue, we'll take a quick break. When we return, we'll hear from the Member of Parliament for Yape Kusogu, John Jinapo, Daniel Ochema Boaje, and then Dr. Japuma Jekedaku comes. Welcome back to the big issue on City 973 and also on City TV Ghana, discussing the state of the economy. Like I said in my initial comments, top of mind for everybody, including the president, who is meeting key members of his government, meeting members of parliament, Apediase, to discuss, meeting leading members of his party as well, to discuss solutions for an economy that is clearly in distress. Fuel prices are up, transport fares are up, food prices are up, everything that has to go up is up. And it seems like there are no signs of it abating anytime soon. So time to put our heads together to find solutions. And I've been doing that with you've heard Joe Jackson, Director of Business Operations at Delex Finance. Franklin Kujo is with us. Dr. Japuma Jekedaku from the University of Ghana is with us. And Ochema Boaje, former Member of Parliament and member of the Finance Committee, is with us. Toma Mehe has also sat down. And let me come to the Member of Parliament for Yape Kusogu. John Jinapo. John, you've also been speaking about the economy for some time now. First of all, your thoughts on where we are and the president calling basically his entire party to Petroleum to say, time to find a solution to this. Is that the ultimate sign of how distressed the economy is?
Thank you very much. Let me express my greetings to Dr. Japuma. It's been a while. She was my lecturer, so it's just appropriate that I recognize her. First of all, I think that's even too late. We've been seeing the signs coming, and I maintain that it's not true that we are in this quagmire because of COVID. COVID has only exacerbated the situation. It's only brought the situation to the fore. Because if you check the 2016 figures vis-a-vis 2019 figures just before COVID, you would see all those signs popping up. The CD depreciated by about 13%. If you look at the industrial sector, I just took some records. So even as I speak, the construction sector from 8.4% in 2016 to negative 8.5%. For a middle-income country, a developing country, your main base is normally construction. You must pour concrete. Electricity access grew by just 0.5% compared to 4%. Interest payment moved from 11 billion to 35 billion. The manufacturing sector dropped from 7.9 to 6.5. The currency depreciation 9.9 against 12.7. Finance and insurance growth 8% compared to 1.8%. Industry sector grew by negative. So there were indicators that, look, things weren't going well. Mr. Jackson talked about the Franklin Templeton borrowing. In the US, they classify their external and internal debt based on nationality. In Ghana, we do so based on denomination. So if it's CD denominated, we classify it as domestic.
Okay.
So you go and take a huge chunk of dollars, bring them into the country, and denominate it as if it's cedis. It's artificial. Because when you pay Franklin Templeton, there's 19% of that CD equivalent. He's not interested in your cedis. Anytime you pay him that or that company that CD equivalent, they must look for dollars, convert it into dollars, and take it back to their country. Meanwhile, you are classifying that as your domestic debt. And normally, domestic debts are manageable because worst case scenario, government will print more notes. It will lead to inflation, people will lose money. But usually, with domestic debt, you are able to manage it as compared to external debt. So you brought in a huge chunk of dollars. It increases your reserves. It makes your CD stabilize. You have a lot of dollars. But as you begin to service, it begins to tighten and tighten and tighten. That is where we are getting to. If you look at our Euro bond receivers, I think we've done about 13.2 billion so far.
Cedis.
Not dollars. I'm talking of Eurobond. Eurobond is denominated in dollars. So you have President Kufuor, President Mensah Mahama borrowing 4.5 billion. And then you have President Akufo-Addo borrowed about 10 and then went for another one in the COVID period. So he alone did about 12 billion. Anytime you borrow from Eurobond, apart from refinancing, the remainder must go into capital expenditure. Because capital expenditure, as the Latin word capus means, is a head that anchors your economy. So I was looking at the budgets from the last 4 years of President Mahama and that of President Akufo-Addo, and I did a graph like capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP or capital expenditure as a percentage of total expenditure. You see that President Akufo-Addo concentrated so much on goods and services. When you do that, people are happy because you're doing NAPCO, you're doing free SHS, they're happy. I mean, I'm no more paying my child's school fees. But it's to the detriment of infrastructure. And so the industrial sector is not growing. The construction sector is not growing. And it will catch up with you. There's no hard rule about that. If you talk to any economist, tell them, look, if you don't anchor your company, even a normal company like CTFM, if you don't invest in these cameras, and you decide that all you do is to pay salaries, yes, you get top-notch journalists like you, but technology keeps changing. So people might not be able to watch CTFM on Facebook. They might not be able to use a podcast and all those things. So you must balance how you spend your money. Today, as we speak, the CD has depreciated by 14% in less than 3 months. That's the reality. In less than 3 months, it surpassed what we had in 2016. It surpassed what we had in 2019, which we considered very, very high. Today, we are spending 47 billion on debt servicing. Our total expected revenue is 105 billion. If you take compensation, debt servicing, and statutory payments, it's more than this money. And so we've had to borrow another 37 billion. So if you go to the budget, then you go look at financing. So even with this, we'll still, even with e-levy and all that, at that time we had pegged the CD to about 7 or so. Now the CD is 8.5. And anytime the CD depreciates, your foreign component in terms of its CD immediately balloons. So I just saw the latest report from the Bank of Ghana, the summary of financial and economic data. Our debt to GDP is now 80.15% today. And that's even as at the end of 2021. Because when the minister presented the budget, we hadn't gotten the last 3 months. So now we are getting the full outturns. Between that January and date, the CD has depreciated by 14%. So take that weighted average and hit it against our external debt. And you would see where we are heading. Meanwhile, we are not able to refinance. Because when we go for Eurobond, you borrow the money, use a part of it to refinance. Because we can't pay the debt. I mean, no country really pays its debt upfront. If I owe Mr. Jackson 5 CD, I come and borrow 7 CD, pay him the 5 CD, and then use the 2 CD for other developmental projects. That's how you roll on. Now that window is virtually shut. Inflation, I just checked the latest one, is 15%. And inflation tells you how your purchasing power is being eaten. In Greater Accra, it is 19%. Fuel prices today, just 1 liter, is over 10 cedis per liter. Yesterday, I did an analysis of 33 African countries. Ghana's fuel is the highest out of 33 African countries. And so, yes, we have COVID. Yes, there's a Ukrainian war. But there's something peculiar about Ghana alone. That's what we ought to be looking at. And not just say there's COVID, yes. How come Rwanda, Senegal, Ethiopia, our peers, those we compare with, how come they are not going through this kind of difficult moments as compared to Ghana? Something must be wrong somewhere. That is the truth. Something must be wrong somewhere, because if something is not wrong somewhere, how come they are doing fairly well? If you look at Togo, you look at Benin, even take the Francophone countries out. Look at the Anglophone countries that are not in the CFA zone. Their currency is not depreciating as fast as our currency is depreciating. And go to 2020. When COVID struck, yes, everybody needed to manage the situation. We took so much money, and you see, those are revenues. So if you pick money from like the stabilization fund, you move it, it becomes revenue. So it's not a deficit. Despite all those monies, we still run a deficit of 15.7%. And that deficit simply means that we've overspent. So your salary is 50 cedi. Before your salary comes, you would have spent. You buy watch, you buy. So when you get your 50, you go and pay. Now, by the end of the month, you're 50. You need extra 15.7% on that in order to pay. Because you don't have that, you have to go to the bank to borrow. That becomes part of your debt. So we are in a spiral situation and going through very, very, very difficult moments. And like Mr. Jackson said, we are witnessing it now. In fact, you don't need anybody to tell you. If you go to most of the shops, they'll tell you, hold on. They'll call those people who change money, what's their name? Not the Forest Bureau, the other ones. Yeah. You know, people do a lot of, they call them, check and compete for you and tell you this is the price. So we are heading for a very, very difficult situation, and something must be done. I see all of us can proffer solution, but the person who implements that solution is President Akufo-Addo and his government. Let's face it, we can only make suggestions because they are seized with the real facts and they make decisions. Because any decision you make in economics, something must give away. There's an opportunity cost. You can't eat your cake and have it. So if you decide you borrow so much, one day bear in mind that you pay for that money. So when you borrow, you must invest in critical areas that will generate revenue. Social protection is good, but you must balance it. I think this government failed to balance social protection, social welfare, vis-a-vis capital expenditure, and the real sectors of the economy. So now, what do we do?
So you think they're paying the price for the political choices?
Oh, yes. That's a fact. You see, we would have borne the brunt of the current global economic situation, but it would have been lesser. That's the truth. If we had been measured and much more prudent, we would have had buffers and some anchors that can withstand the shocks to a certain level. But as it stands, it looks like we're being swept away. Look at how the currency is depreciating, look at inflation, and you decide that you hold interest rate. But go and check the loan portfolio from the Bank of Ghana. A chunk of it goes to government. So if the interest rates are low and the private sector cannot access it, you are crowding out the private sector. And all the banks are now moving to the government. Then it's not that beneficial because that capital must be available for the private sector so they can spare growth. And it's very easy to just use GDP figures. In fact, these days, most countries are moving away from just nominal or GDP growth because it doesn't really tell the story. You rather go into the real sectors. And so people are now looking at inclusive growth. People are looking at other indexes at ensuring that even as you grow, that growth gets into the real areas. So, in a nutshell, we are waiting for what will come out of PDRC. I don't want to take on the finance minister, but I think that it should be flexible. I have a feeling
You're worried
that
by they taking the IMF off the table, because it does look like the framing is that you're part of the political divide wants to force the government.
Oh, no. That's not true. That's not true. Look,
To make a
the
political
things that
case.
you will go to IMF and they'll ask you to do, you can as well decide to do them. And we know the things the IMF will ask you to do. Because the IMF's principal concentration is balance of payments. That's what the IMF is not like the World Bank. The World Bank deals more with infrastructure and construction. The IMF is interested in your financial architecture such that you have sound financial base. And they will tell you that balance it. If you are not able to balance it, then they will make suggestions to you. But you must balance. As for that one, the IMF will insist that you must balance out. And we know the things that we ought to do in order to balance out. The problem, like you said, is a political decision. Because, for instance, free SHS, we've politicized it so much so that one sector is waiting to see whether it will collapse or not. And the other sector says, no, even against reality, I'm going to press ahead with free SHS. The finance minister attempted to scrap NAPCO. If you read the 2021 budget, he gave an indication that he was scrapping NAPCO. There was political upheaval from his own party. And so you've had to hold them. Those monies you pay to the NAPCO interns, who sit at home virtually, if you were to build some factories, couldn't you have employed them? Let's even assume that you can employ only 60% or 50% of that NAPCO personnel. At least they are contributing to productivity. They are gainfully employed. They are learning something and contributing to the growth of the economy. But it does appear that the fanfare, the populism is taking over, and today, this is where we are. Look, I used to buy fuel 500 to fill my tank a week. I've had to do 800. So 300 CD extra. That's even more than what I would have paid with e-levy. So I don't even think that e-levy is the panacea. Yes, government wants e-levy. Let's discuss that. But I do not believe that e-levy is the panacea. And when you even look at the depreciation today, and you do the projection, and look at the losses, it probably will eat that 6 billion of e-levy that they are talking about.
Right, John, thank you for your initial thoughts. I'll come to that. Mr. Waje.
Hello.
Yes. So you've heard Mr. Jackson, you've heard Mr. Jinapo. It does look quite bad. Your friends in the NPP are currently meeting to find solutions for what obviously is a very bad situation. In your estimation, what are the options available to you? You are not at Pidasi. You are at home. What are the options?
Let me say good morning to your listeners and, of course, to the people that have gathered here this morning to do a national service on your platform. And, of course, my good friend, Honorable Jinapo, good morning to you once again. I'm just wondering where you were when MDC was in power, with all these nice suggestions and contributions you're making, especially in respect of the numbers. And because you took us to 2016 and 19, I just want to give a little bit of a background to some of these causes. And then to Jackson's points and his submissions, I totally agree with most of them as prescription for solution, though they tend to be a lot more short-term. And there are other long-term solutions that we can suggest, except to say that I disagree that investment in senior high school is consumption. I totally disagree on that one. So I'll come back to that.
Okay.
So let's look at what happened. Okay, so in 2017, you come to power. Right? We are not denying the fact that we are in difficult times. We are totally in difficult times. And that is not something you want to basically debate. It is fact. I run businesses, I see this, it shows everywhere. And so from the households to firms, therefore, if you aggregate all this together, the nation is in difficulty. There's no doubt about that. So this is not something we have to go back and forth on that. So we are in difficulties. What happens? You come to power in 2017, and what happens? Look at all the numbers we inherited in 2016. GDP growth rate, I don't know when GDP has become misplaced these days from what my friend is saying, of 3.4%, and we managed to get it to about almost 7% on average by 2019. Inflation was about 15.4. I think we brought it to a single digit at some point in time before COVID, all right? the lending rate, or even if you talk about the prime rate, it was about 16. In the NDC, it was about 25.5%. We brought it down to, I think, 13.5%, which makes it easier for businesses to borrow. Even the government then, and DC government, was borrowing from some of the commercial banks at the rate of about 32%, using the road fund as collateral at the rate of 32%. When MPP came to power, we refinanced these issues, this loan, I think at 21% with commercial bank, or I think Fidelity Bank or so. So there were issues. The numbers did not look good. So if you look at this 16-17 or 16-19 or 17-19 that he's talking about, we had done a little bit better until COVID hit. Talking about these things, we're also dealing with legacy issues. Few other issues that our friends in the power before we came in had gotten the country to. We had to pay and manage financial crisis with a tune of about 21.6 billion the last time I checked. Okay, we had to deal with take or pay energy prices of about 12 billion. Pension was not paid. There's tier 2, about 3.1 billion. I'm just basically speaking to the fact that there has been some long background to this, given where my friends started. And COVID hit.
So Mr. Chawaja, you are basically saying that the problems that we are facing now are not just born out of the situations we have seen in the past year or two, but have roots from 5 years ago?
Yes. For instance, if we didn't have to pay about 21.6 billion to resolve the financial crisis, which was so necessary to do, to about 4.6 million Ghanaians who have deposited their monies with this bank, that money alone could have supported even free senior high school for 5 years. All right? So if we didn't have to do that, we could have constructed many roads, many bridges, we could have done a lot of infrastructure.
But there were other options available. I recall people saying that, yes, it was the right action to take, but there were other ways of going about about that particular operation. So yes, you can say we had to spend 21 million, but that was your decision to spend.
Those other alternatives were considered.
Okay.
They were not ignored. They were considered. And don't forget, when you give the government mandate to rule, right? And of course, decisions have consequences. We have endowed or have given MPP mandate to rule. And based on all the options open, those are the options they chose. If we fail, we will face the consequences of our decisions, right? And we're up to that. Ghanaians gave us a second mandate to go on. What happened? Because all the arguments that my friend Jinapo is advancing, they knew that we had done a little better compared to when we started. And that's why we had the second mandate. And then COVID hits. And I think I have to speak to this point from a practical point of view. And my friend Joe Jackson probably, I don't know what happened to his Fed. I also run a microfinance, probably one of the biggest microfinance in Ghana. And for almost 15 years, by June will be 15 years, employing over 300 people and 25 branches in 9 regions. For the first time in 12 years, we made losses. We made losses because the economy was basically closed down during COVID in 2020. And we are still recovering from that. So when households are affected, firms are affected, what do you think the impact is going to be on the macro? Similar effect. And that is what the country is going through. So anybody who comes around to say that there's no relationship between what is happening to us and the negative effects of COVID is just basically being economical with the truth.
But is there not a case also to be made? Because I've heard economists say, yes, we talk about growth, but an economist like Stephen Bequin says, what you've supervised is basically jobless growth. And that kind of growth cannot be considered strong because there's no money coming in. So again, you chose what to do with the money that came to you.
Okay.
And the choices you've made do not seem to have helped.
Well, I totally disagree with that. Probably he's looking at it from where he sits. Let me give you another example, practical example, right? So, and those people who say governance is all about building infrastructure, I think that is very looking at it very limited way. Governance is not just about looking at infrastructure. Let me give you an example. I think the treasury bill rate was about 20-25% on the NDC. MPP came in, dropped as low as what? As I think 12% or so. People had given me money as a business person. It was very difficult. When we had excess money, we put in treasury bill. But when it fell that low, there was no incentive to do that. We took that money, made a decision as a firm, took that money, created a job. People make money creating job than doing what? Than keeping it in treasury bills. So today, a company was established in 2018. All right, I don't want to advertise here, but a company was established in 2018 because of that government policy. And it employs over 170 people. So what are you talking about? Policies not creating jobs. And I'm talking from a practical point of view. All right. So the policies that were taken, even when you talk about something like NAPO, much as you look at it as social protection or social intervention, our friends call it extended national service. There was other side to the coin they didn't look at. Here you have young people, young women and men coming out of university with no jobs. Have you assessed the national security risk of these people getting into social vices that could hurt all of us? So all these are some of the contributing factors. We started from, I remember the president had met the majority caucus in Koforidua and said, listen, guys, we owe it to Ghanaians to do right for the people of Ghana. What we knew in opposition, that the crisis was XYZ, is even deeper than what we have seen. So we have to be doing things right and make sure we move this country forward. So the point I'm making is that the background of where we started was bad. Don't forget, we are a developing country. We are fragile. We cannot compare ourselves to America in some cases, or the UKs, or the Europeans who have sustained their growth or even revenue generation for a long time. So for a long time, what have you been doing? We are managing. We are fragile. Any air could blow us off because we are now trying to make sure we sustain our growth. And there was something that my friend just said that what is happening to Ghana? Ghana must be unique or must have a unique situation. Why didn't you compare the numbers between us and you when you had the mandate? Yes, maybe Rwanda may be doing well. Ghana may be unique because we are ambitious. We want to make sure we develop faster. Cutting government expenditure is not the way to go. But yet, because of this crisis, we have to. Because government expenditure is an injector in the national income. So the point I'm making is that the causes have been there. You just didn't really see a very clear, causes of some of these issues, looking at the fact that we used to borrow, leave some of the money in our reserves, and therefore stabilize the economy by the money that we did not. If you get the money from the Eurobond, you leave some there and then use that to manage. And therefore, if you're not getting more money from borrowing from outside to stabilize the economy, you must do something different. And he made a point that I so much admire, that if you look at what is also happening to the US Treasury, it's going to affect us. We had a downgrade. That you can't deny that. People's confidence have lost. So the best way you can prove to the world that you are capable of dealing with your own issues is to begin to look internally. Let's look at internally what we can do for ourselves before we even consider going to IMF or anywhere else. Because if you're not able to show the investor community that you are capable of generating funds locally to even support your own budget, then you have a problem. And who's going to entrust money to you? And so what happens? The government responds, it's okay, we have had COVID. Let's get out. Borrowing has become expensive. You will not deny the fact that MPP government has borrowed in terms of amount bigger than the NDC. But in terms of the running rate of borrowing, if the baton was in NDC's hand, we will be in trillions. Because their running rate, and at this morning I was talking somewhere, NDC borrowing running rate is like cola or Usain Bolt. Okay, in terms of the rate of borrowing. But of course, to whom much is given, much is expected. Too much more is given, much more is expected. We had over 1 million votes higher than NDC coming into 2017. So we had to do a little bit more to sustain, to pick ourselves from the mess and begin to walk, and COVID hit. And now today we have Ukraine. So now levy is going to help us. It's not the solution to everything. No. After how much is it? It's probably $1 billion. $1 billion dollars. And then what are we saying? Our friends in opposition are saying, we will not support you. If you think that levy is going to kill us, why don't you allow us to go so that we are killed and you take over? Why?
But what's stopping the majority from presenting the levy in Parliament? Nobody has stopped you.
Of course, there are dynamics. I believe at the right time, the leadership will present. No.
It's okay.
And let's face fact. Jackson makes a good point that I so much admire him for that point that he made, that it is time for consensus.
Mm-hmm.
It is time for consensus. Why are we so divided? What are we doing? Are we choosing our partisan interests over the national development? If you think levy is going to kill Ghanaians, let MPP go and die.
But
support it.
So
you can now go. My friend did a press conference. Honorable John. He did a press conference. I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, saying that government should step up and support Ghanaians. The response has delayed. Where are you rushing to? You go upstream and destroy the waters and come downstream and say, who goes up? Who mess up the water? You are not supporting yet. When price of fuel is increasing, you are calling on the government that is so broke to come and help Ghanaians. That, to me, is quite insensitive. You're basically laughing at us. Those of us who run businesses, Ghanaians who are suffering. Because at one point in time, you are not supporting the government's agenda, even if that is going to lead the government into opposition. You must be praying that let levy go kill them, and we will come to power. So I believe that these causes are factual. The solutions are there in the short term. We have to cut expenditure and do it carefully. We have to make sure that we spend efficiently. We have to look for opportunities to increase or mobilize more revenue. And we have to make sure that we ultimately, in the long run, are able to build a country that is beyond aid, where we actually eat what we produce, sleep what we produce, drive what we produce, employ what we produce, and export what we produce, and ultimately patronize Ghana. That is the long-term solution. Until we do that, if you continue to depend, so the Chinese go for a New Year's holiday, and what happens to us? The supply chain is broken. There's shortage, right? We depend on foreign money, and if the money is not coming, we can't sustain our dollar. So there are solutions, and even this platform, what is being discussed right now, powerful, but we've got to choose Ghana first. And
all right.
That is just my position.
All right. Thank you very much. Daniel Chemabua just says choose Ghana first. Let me hear from Dr. Japoma Jekado from the University of Ghana Business School. Well, Doc, I'm sure you've heard the different sides of this, but I want to bring you to finding ways forward on this matter. You've heard some of the solutions that have come, like from the IEA. We've heard even some members of parliament, for instance. We had one this week who said cut some of the social interventions or suspend them, at least for now. You've heard Joe Jackson as well. What is your take on this and the best available options for the government, short term, medium term, long term?
Right. So, good morning to your listeners and your viewers, and thank you for this platform. I've heard so many things this morning. I've heard Dr. Joe Jackson speak. I've also heard Honorable speak. I've heard Honorable John Jinapor also speak. And they basically summed up everything that I want to say about what is happening currently in the economy. I feel very sorry for the government now because currently, if you are the manager of the economy, you are torn between the deep blue sea and the devil, and it's a very difficult choice that you have a very difficult choice to make. So we have the option of trying to put things in place within our domestic economy or running to IMF for a solution. And from what I believe, I think that as a country, if we are able to do the things, because running to the IMF or going to the IMF would obviously have some implications for our economy, and we need to be very mindful of those implications. So if you go to the IMF, remember that the IMF is going to be supporting you with your balance of payment issues, going to give you balance of payment support, and also going to be helping you with some technical support. Now, supporting your balance of payments would obviously come with some cost, because they would have to ensure that you are putting in the right measures in the economy to ensure that your economy is moving in the track that you want to be moving once they move away from you, the IMF moves away from you. And so that would mean that setting policies or setting expenditures that we had put in place as a country to be able to expend are not going to be happening as I speak to you now. As I speak to you, I am sure there are many labor unions that want to agitate for an increment in their wages, etc. When you go to IMF, that's not going to happen. There are also other conditions like there's going to be a hold on employment. We cannot employ people in the formal sector. And so these are the conditions that are going to be coming with going to IMF. Now, if we are in a position that we can resolve the issues that we have in our country domestically, I see no reason why we should be going to IMF. Now, so what do we do domestically as a country? Now, we need to be able to mobilize enough revenue, and all the other speakers on the panel have actually said that. We need to be very aggressive in domestic revenue mobilization. I mean, I know that there's this contention on the e-levy and whether the e-levy should be passed or not. But I think that going beyond e-levy, we need to find other ways of mobilizing our revenue. One way is to look at property taxes. Another way is to be aggressive with other forms of taxes and look at e-commerce. Even if the e-levy is not going to be passed in the holistic way, I believe that some aspects of it can be adopted by the various political parties in parliament and then help Ghana to revive its economy. There are so many people carrying out businesses online transactions happening in the economy, and those people are not really paying taxes. I mean, in the countries where we see a lot of development taking place, we see that taxes are being paid. And therefore, as Ghanaians, we should know that it's important, or we should understand the importance of payment of taxes, because it's the only way that we can use to develop our country without resorting to borrowing that has brought us to the level that we are now. Another thing that we can do is to look at the expenditure side as well. So, I heard people speak about government coming down on its expenditure. Nobody is saying that government should not spend, because if government doesn't spend, our economy doesn't grow, or our economy doesn't develop, because government expenditure actually feeds into our national income and so forth and so on. So it's really important that government becomes prudent in its expenditure. I mean, we need to be efficient. And now that we find ourselves in crisis, it is very, very important that things that we see that are not quite necessary for the country at the moment, we try to get off those things and try to save Ghana some money so that we can send a signal to the international community, that we hope to consolidate our fiscal position, and then we can get them to also bring some capital in to influence other macro aspects of the economy.
On the matter of domestic revenue mobilization, that has been spoken about. You mentioned property taxes. It's been suggested several times over the past 5 or 6 years. We hear promises that never are actualized, on what to do with that. Then also, there's the question of the government's need for immediate cash versus its agenda to also industrialize. And this is what brings us to, for instance, the conflict over the benchmark values and its attendant problems for now. How does the government maneuver itself through all these things, at least to be able to get that credibility almost immediately?
So we are looking, we know that the problems that we are facing currently are coming, the current issues that we are in now are coming from world market prices of oil going up, also our exchange rate position, and so forth and so on. So if we find world market oil prices going up, that obviously feeds into our fuel prices and feeds into basically everything that we are doing. So if we are seeing the cost of living go up, it's because of, mainly now, it's because of these two issues amidst other issues, mainly. Now, what do we do now? Before we talk about the long-term solutions, what do we do now? I think that the central bank should be able, at this point, to try. I know that because of the COVID, they've been trying to relieve us of some of the problems in the economy, and they've been trying to boost businesses, investment in the economy. And therefore, over the periods, they've tried very hard to reduce the monetary policy rate. But I think that in the interim, to resolve our problems, one of the short-term measures that we can resort to would have to do with the central bank coming up with a monetary policy rate that actually is a bit on the higher side compared to what we are facing now. Because what that does for us is that it signals to the international market that the economy is trying to do something about the position that it is in now. And that boosts investor confidence and tries to bring in some capital. So then we end up having capital inflows because of this action that is taken by the central bank. Apart from boosting or apart from sending the signals onto the international markets that this is really what we are doing and attracting foreign inflows into our country to help stabilize our currency in a way, it also sends a signal to the speculators out there that the central bank is trying to take some action to restore our cedi. And therefore, those people who have been speculating and taking advantage of the situation now would try and put a stop to it. And then that would cause our cedi to appreciate. Remember that the exchange rate market has a self-fulfilling prophecy. And once that signal is sent out, and once we see a bit of an appreciation of our currency, we are going to be seeing the speculators also reacting quickly, and that would cause our currency to strengthen the more. So that's on the monetary side. Now, on the fiscal side, like I've already said, it's also important to signal to our investors who are out there that the government is making an effort to consolidate. So like the IEA has put out there, trying to cut down on the immediate things that we can cut down as a country would give a signal to the international market that you are trying to consolidate. When they give money out to you, you'll be able to repay quickly. And then that would actually allow them to bring in money to the economy.
Thank you very much for those thoughts, Dr. Japoma Jeke-Ado. Let me take some messages quickly, and then we'll take a break before our next round, where we'll also hear from Toma and Franklin. I will start that round from Mr. Honorable Jinapo, and then move around in the opposite direction. Just some quick messages that have come through on this. Prince Henry says Dr. Bawumia should just come out and apologize to Ghanaians for his unprecedented mismanagement of the economy. Is he aware that a liter of fuel is more than 10 Ghana cedis and the dollar has crossed the 8 Ghana cedi mark? The government should stop talking and walk the talk we are suffering. Julius Afedi in Somenya says if Honorable Jinapos claims that other African countries are not going through similar economic crisis that Ghana is going through, it's a palpable falsehood. It says Nigeria is going through a worse situation. It should be sincere in comparing Ghana to other countries. Even the US and the UK are not having it easy. NDC just wants Ghana to go to the IMF so Ghanaians can suffer the more. And that's a question I'm going to come to. This image or perception issue, well, there's a debate, and I asked that earlier, whether going to the IMF it's been kind of demonized. And Toma, I will let you deal with that from the onset, because honestly, if you look at the data and Julius Afedi, from what I've seen of the Ghana going to the IMF in 2017, actually worked. So we might need to have a conversation about whether going to the IMF really is as bad as it's been painted out to be in that regard. So I'll take a break. We'll hear from Toma when I return.
Tell them I'm not in, eh? Tell them. When you evade taxes, you put yourself at risk of prosecution. Do the right thing. Pay your duties and taxes online, through the bank, or from your phone on time. And let's build a great nation.
Do you want a modern vision for your office or a touch of sophistication for your living and bedroom spaces? Look no further than Kingdom Books and Stationery. At Kingdom Books and Stationery, we've been selling furniture and stationery for more than 20 years. Ours is a trusted brand that offers contemporary furniture designs that are elegant and timeless. And with so many designs, there is something for everyone. We have executive and swivel chairs, office desk, tables and office equipment such as office safes, computers and accessories, as well as cabinets and shredders. Make your home a sanctuary with our wide range of home furniture, including beds, wardrobes, coffee and dining tables, and poolside chairs, hard copy books, notebooks, and all the accessories you would need for school or your workplace. So visit us today. You can locate us on the Osu-La Road or the Akwa J Junction in Accra. Alternatively, you can shop online at www.kingdomstoreonline.com. Kingdom Books and Stationery, delivering the promise.
Welcome back to The Big Issue on City TV and also City 973. You can keep sending your messages 0549 986 996, 0550 585832, 0549 986 996, and 0550 5832. As we continue to have a conversation around the economy alongside the meeting that is being held in Pejasi, we're also trying to find solutions for an obviously ailing economy. And Toma, let me come to you and then I'll wrap this round up with Franklin. On this IMF, and you saw I have a lot of those messages here, there seems to be a very open debate. IMF is evil. IMF is not evil. And it's become very partisan, which I find disturbing, considering that what we need, as Joe Jackson said, is a bipartisan approach to this. In your estimation, why has it become IMF is bad, IMF is not bad? And what do we need to do going forward?
The thing is this. Which medicine have you taken for malaria that is not bitter? Remember, Joe was saying earlier in the program that no matter what we do, it's going to be painful. And that is the simple truth. IMF programs are painful because they are aimed at getting us out of difficult positions which we have created for ourselves. Okay? So in terms of that, criticizing the IMF for coming up with painful decisions is neither here nor there, because I mean there's no other alternative to getting out of a hard situation than by taking painful decisions. However, there is another side to this issue. You see, in 2015, went to the IMF for extended credit facility program, and yes, the figures showed it worked. I mean, set to some extent, but there remember one thing: when we left the program and before COVID hit, our growth figures actually improved because we now move from demand management economics, which is what the IMF is about. As Honorable has said, the IMF is the balance of payments institution. It's as simple as that. It exists to make sure that poor countries like us will not default on our debts to everybody else. Now, the IMF is the balance of payments institution, right? So they always look at demand management. Cut your demand down according to what you have, according to your cloth, so to say. This government, the current government, before it came to power, has said that no, they want to go the other way. They want to go into expansionary economy, what we call supply side economics, which boils down to trying to increase your cloth, so to say, to meet what you need, and that itself was its own debate. But until COVID came, there was actually an improvement in our growth figures. Whether that improvement would have been sustainable even if COVID had not come, I can't say. All right? But there was an improvement which works against the case for going to the IMF. Okay. That is one side of it. But generally, my attitude to our IMF is very simple. I know a lot of people don't like me when I say this thing. I believe we should go to the IMF for the simple fact that the IMF will not only give us the programs that we use to improve our situation, but to make sure they implement those programs properly without putting half of the resources in our back pockets and diverting to other things.
Even under the current circumstances we find ourselves, you think there is still potential for that?
Sorry?
I said, even in the circumstances that we find ourselves, you still think there's potential for mismanagement?
Oh yes, there is. But look, all the things that have led us up to this thing. I mean, Joe Jackson was talking about the fact he has been warning about this situation that was coming from. Is that how many years?
Since 2014.
Well, 2014. I beat you by 1 year. I started writing about them in 2013 when we created the Finder newspaper. That was in 2013. I said we're heading for this crash. Exactly the same precise reasons was led to this. But here we are. We've had two different political parties since then to have gone ahead down this road. As Joe would say, they keep kicking the can further down the road until we get to this situation. The fact is that, and I always say, the first and most important consideration for a politician is to win power and maintain it. The underlying economics that keeps an economy in a sustainable fashion is a secondary consideration. So when you say that even in the situation we are in, whether our leaders will still have ways to, divert resources and stuff like that, my answer is a definite yes.
Now, you also made mention of coal receipts, which have been declining for some time. What's happening there? We used to make some good money there.
Well, that actually is basically, it's been a case of unfavorable weather. It's difficult to blame any government or anybody for that situation. Cocoa Board has actually done quite
No,
well.
I'm talking about the volumes. The volumes improved last year.
The volumes improved last year.
Because the revenue is a function of the volume and the price.
Yeah, but this
And
year...
then, when you get that money, the debt servicing within the cocoa sector. Because then even as you've gotten the revenue, what actually comes into the kitty?
Okay, 3 things have gone wrong.
Let me just open it.
3 things have gone there. One, the volumes have fallen compared with last year. Last year we made probably the highest volumes in the history of those have fallen since then. Of course, prices have fallen since then. I mean, we all saw that coming because there was global oversupply. At the time that COVID had reduced demand for chocolate, the world was supplying more cocoa than ever before. Then, of course, there's the issue which I'm sure Honorable would like to come to, which is the issue of whether or not we overborrowed in order to pay off farmers against their production for this year. Because that is another case which some people have brought up, which is very, very debatable. You've taken a loan to pay off farmers based on your expectations that you have to pay them a certain amount of money because this is the price and this is the volume. Now, the volume is lower than what you expected, the prices are lower than what you expected, but you are locked into the loan and the interest you're going to pay on that loan. So that now gives you another problem again. So that is another problem that Ghana has found itself in. Although, as I said, in some cases, this is not something you can really blame a government particularly for. These are one of those things that happen. The global economy just worked against us, so to say.
Franklin.
Yes.
Franklin, I think there's a problem with Franklin's connection. His organization, Imani, this week has been very busy.
Interesting tutorials in economics.
Yeah, Franklin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, your sound was a bit
problematic.
Your sound was a bit problematic. I was saying this week, Imani Ghana has been very vociferous, saying, well, we told you so. You didn't listen to us. Here we are.
Well, I mean, rather than coming from that position, I think
that's how it looked like.
Well, I mean, it has been an interesting lessons in economics, listening to my good friends and new friends on the show today. There's one thing that keeps ringing through my mind, and which is, actually it's a question. Why is pragmatism in all of this? You see, it's not as if we've not had these instances before, or these situations before. Right from the days of Nkrumah up until now, we've had all these endless cycles of booms and busts. But there's one thing that has remained constant, is the political, expediency, or should I call it inexpediency, of behaving rationally and prudently. So for me, all these things we keep saying, many people have said it, and my friends have said it on this show, a time without number. The only thing that is missing now is pragmatism, which is why I agree with Toma that given the traumatized nature of the economy right now, the only person with the single most important rod that will keep us in line is the IMF. And of course, we're going to the IMF at a time when it is a bit too late. Remember the last time we had these conversations about the IMF being a demon or a saint? We revealed that, look, the IMF, the history of Ghana going to the IMF over the last 16 times has always been because we wait when it is too late. It is not as if the IMF has not got better facilities for countries like Ghana. Of course, I mean, there are countries that have, received loads of money under different facilities. But when you wait and you go and assess the enhanced credit, basically the SOS one, then clearly you may be afraid. So I think that we can have the conversations we want to have between the government, within the government circles, but they must come back and let's have a national policy renewal forum. Mind you, the word is renewal. And to the extent that renewal means respecting and being prudent about the things that you yourself have agreed to do. Because face it, when the finance minister says we'll cut back expenditure, we'll do A, B, C, D, these are things that we've had time without number. And these are things you'll be told by the IMF anyway. The difference is that with the IMF, you can't dodge. You have to obey it. And like Thomas said, you can't, for lack of a better word, pocket any change because they'll be looking over your shoulders anyway. So for me, I think prudency is the word. If we can do all the things we are saying, we can say we want to slash back, do A, B, C, D. I don't think we're enough not to repeat these things in the near future. So that's what I've got to say. So, but going to the IMF should not be seen as an enterprise in futility. It's only when the reasons for which you are going or the time you are going is problematic.
No, but
so the key word for me, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Wasn't just that, but yes, the IMF, but we've also heard this week, for instance, that there's a consideration to look at some of the taxes. If you've heard we had the Deputy Energy Minister, Honorable Ejapamesa, for instance, talk about the consideration to take off some of the taxes. Basically, they are looking at options at cushioning Ghanaians immediately. They are looking at reopening land borders. So that basically is to generate some kind of economic activity at border points, which are also very important.
Well, I mean, the taxes or the revision of a component of the taxes is not something that we've not said before. It's welcome news. If it is going to be close to almost 60 pesos, or probably 90 pesos when it comes to the pricing of fuel, and I think Jinapon knows this better than anybody else, that would be cushioning enough because clearly speaking, those taxes that amount to almost 62 pesos, those stabilization or so-called taxes have outlived their usefulness. If those are the ones that are being considered, well, it's welcome news, but it's overdue. The land borders issue, well, that's also very good. If there's been any analysis to show that automatically to increase trade volumes would increase and thereby taxes would be due to the states. Well, maybe that's also something that should be done. But you see, again, all these, baby steps, or should I say, important steps, will defy common sense when we decide to go back to our old ways after we've seen some respite. As I said, we've seen all this before. The only challenge is that we are not able to discipline ourselves to be able to remain on the path of sustainability.
Thank you, Franklin. Let me come.
Still maintain that.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Franklin. Sorry for the poor quality at the end there, but we'll try and fix the connection with Franklin. So, John, let me come back to you. Now, listening to all of you, so IMF, austerity, corruption, what can the government do to, now? John, now.
Let's first of all agree that...
Because just hold on for me. I'm just looking at this, and it looks like a whole lot of things seem to have gone wrong at the same time. Some might say we need a whole lot of things to go right at the same time to get us out of this.
See, when
are we going to get that lucky?
When your immune system is weak, you seem to have a lot of things going on at the same time. Common flu affects you, that's how it is. So let's agree that the economy is in bad shape. I haven't really, Mr. Jackson keeps saying it, but I haven't heard government, Mr. Jackson, admit that we are in very difficult moments. I haven't heard that.
The finance minister
has said Ghana is broke. Use the exact phrase.
On his e-levy
he said that.
town
Yes.
hall. Yes, on
Yes.
his e-levy.
That is it. Then we are broke.
The finance minister.
Then what is the argument again?
Says
So
things are
let's establish that we are broke.
Yes.
If you are broke, you no longer drink tea the way you used to. If you are broke, you no longer fry eggs the way you used to. If you are broke, you don't drink beer the way you used to. It's as simple as that. So if we are broke, let's sit down and begin to look at where we are cutting. This 20% they talked about, they said they are cutting capital expenditure. They didn't say they are cutting expenditure.
And for the
because they can't
first
cut
quarter,
expenditure.
for the
and for
first-
1 quarter. And we all agree that the lack of investment in our capital expenditure is a contributing factor to where we are. That is a fact. My friend Ochim says free SHS is capital expenditure. Well, away from that one. In our budget line, there are 3 main line items: compensation, capex, and goods and services. You must fall within one of these. And the minister himself classifies free SHS as consumption. Because capital expenditure is expenditure which assets outlives 1 year. If you pay the president's school fees for this year, how do you classify that as capital expenditure? So, but you see, it's also about how we spend the money. I have the energy sector levies account. I've been doing some analysis. We've collected over 18 billion so far. If you check the expenditure, we spent 15 billion. I've been probing where did that 3 billion go to. Even the stabilization fund, stabilization levy that Franklin is talking about, we're supposed to collect over 2 billion. At a point, they suspended it based on this same political reasoning. So instead of the 2.2 billion, they collected 1.5 billion. They've spent 1 billion. The extra 500 million has been borrowed for other things. So even the way we spend the money, we should look at that. And also the inefficiencies at the downstream sector. I've been doing a lot of analysis. If you look at the OMCs in Ghana, we've moved from 144 to 251 in just 4 years. It's not done anywhere. Because then economies of scale comes in, cost factor comes in. If you go to Europe, you hardly see more than 8 branded filling stations. How do you call it? Petrol stations. Yeah. How can Ghana have over 250 OMCs operating in this small country? And then I'm looking at some of them. Some are registered in 2019. They were doing like 3 million liters. Then in 2020, the election year, they began to do 97 million. And you must have a certain number of filling stations before you can do those huge liftings. The huge liftings are done by Goil, Shell, and Total. So if all of a sudden a small company, and I haven't seen any of their filling stations, it's moved from a lifting of 3 million to 97 million. Then 2021, after first quarter, they shut down. They no longer operate. They are no longer in the system. There's a lot of inefficiency going on. Then, you see, one of the issues that drives all these things is the issue of petroleum. One of the keys, because petroleum is led to transport fares increasing by 15%. I just took
that
graphic.
also affects the prices of goods.
It affects I just look, producer price rises to 21%. The producer price as against the consumer price is what the manufacturing sector, let me put it in simply, the cost to them. As their cost is increasing, then you expect the consumer price to also increase because it's a pass-through. And it's on account of petroleum and all those things. In 2008, the Minister of Energy said they were going to build a new refinery that had a capacity to produce 150,000 barrels a day, which is more than even Ghana's demand, and then export the rest. He said that by 2022 it will be ready. As we speak, the project hasn't even started. And if you look at our total production in terms of petroleum products, we do about 71 million barrels annually. Minimum 20% is attributable to Ghana. We just go and sell that and then bring the raw money and then turn around and import finished products. Meanwhile, we have a refinery. So what are we doing to deal with some of this? So when we say that we can do something, IMF, they can consider it. It's not, look, whether you go to IMF or not, you must make decisions. And those tough decisions have to be taken because we don't have the money. It's not as if the money is there and we are contemplating what to do with it. So whether IMF or not, government has to take some tough decisions.
But it's the death of the tough decisions that matter. Because, for instance, like I said, you've heard the talk on removing some of the taxes. You've heard the talk of opening the land borders. Are those the kind of things you expect to hear
so
from
once you remove a
meeting like
tax
this?
handle, it means that you're also reducing revenue.
Can I make a little?
Please.
I want to join my voice to Honorable John Jinapo's issue. You see, when we talk about our tax revenues not being enough, some of the huge hole in that energy sector, companies appear, take supposedly left horrendous huge amounts of, don't pay the taxes and disappear. That's a huge leakage. And what it does is that it makes it worse for those of us who are paying, because essentially what somebody has done is to take that 40% margin on that is supposed to come to all of us to cushion what our problems, and has put a significant portion of that in his back pocket. It's a huge leakage. It's one area that I've looked at, and some of the figures there are frightening.
No, it's scary. It's scary.
They're
It's scary.
frightening.
It's scary.
And unfortunately, you get the sense that maybe some of our politicians are complicit in these undertakings, because why we allow them to get away with it?
Mr. Jackson, I've checked the owners of that company in particular, and I can confirm to you that they are politicians. Because I've gone to Register General to check, and I can confirm to you that they are politicians.
Frightening. The figures are frightening, because you see, if you lift, what's the value of a ton of diesel or a ton of petrol? And if you lift 96 million liters, and then you take 40% of that money, it's gone, disappeared, kaput. There's a lot, you see, side by side with raising revenue, there's a lot we can also do to stop some of those leakages, especially in the petroleum sector, where it's staring at us in our face.
Point well made.
So in concluding, we just talked about this collateralization of our revenues. That's another factor, Mr. Jackson. Because when you look at the budget, basically revenue, expenditure. So you see revenue line items. ESLA is captured, Get Fund is captured, NHA. A chunk of it goes to service these collateralized facilities already. So it's not even revenue readily available to you, because we've spent that money. Get Fund, we've collateralized. Mineral royalties, we've collateralized. NHIS, we've collateralized. ESLA revenue, we've collateralized. Now there's even talk of collateralizing the one we're fighting over, e-levy. So we should also be careful with this collateralization. Because the rate at which we are collateralizing, future generations might come and there will be virtually nothing left. If we are collateralizing, and we say that maybe our petroleum resources, we want to take part of it to build a refinery, I'm for it. Because if you build a refinery,
It's here.
the value chain, because if you take I think it's 321, 3 barrels of
See, you are making the way you're making it sound like when you talk about this collateralization of these items, all right, fine, it's being done. Now, when it comes to oil, please don't start talking about let us not collateralize oil. Oil was one of the first things we collateralized. We collateralized oil. We collateralized Jubilee oil in September 2007, when we went to the Eurobond market to take 750 million US dollars 4 months after, 5 months after Jubilee oil was discovered. In 2013, your government collateralized the 10 oil cluster.
For what?
When you started going to the Eurobond market in 2013,
when we started going to the Eurobond market, each time we go to the Eurobond market, the main what do you call it?
Sales point.
No.
Is oil.
Let's establish this. Let's establish. There's a PRMA. I think 85335. The PRMA specifies how revenues from petroleum ought to be disbursed. The PRMA makes it a point that you cannot collateralize against those old revenues. If I may just end, I beg you.
His is not. He's not talking about official collateralization.
But that is it. No, but we're talking about the official.
is coming. Why is
I get your point.
That he's talking about official.
Yeah, I'm talking of
recognized-
official collateralization.
Okay,
Where
yeah,
we
yeah,
say that revenues from GET fund,
Yes.
it goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Go to pay this debt. Revenue from NHIS, it goes nowhere. As for the debt, it's a country-wide debt. Whether we use oil or not, we still have to pay.
It's in the same pot.
So it's in the same pot. But my point is that when we take facilities against this source of revenue, we should
we
be
did for ESWA.
specific, yes. So for instance, if you take Ghana Gas, we decided that we'll take a loan for Ghana Gas. Even cocoa, we collateralize against cocoa. We use Buidam. Part of our cocoa is used to pay for Buidam. I agree on those ones because these are interventions that really boost your economy. Because Ghana Gas alone in 2017, because of import substitution, we saved $300 million. Today, Ghana Gas produces 50% of our LPG. Even as we talk of LPG prices going up, Ghana Gas has just written to MPA that we have excess gas. So ban the importation of LPG and compel them to lift our gas. Some of these things, they look small, but if you aggregate them and begin to look at the impact, look at Commander Sugar Factory. There are issues, yes. NDC and MPP will fight over it. But can't we just sit down and say that, look, in 3 years' time, we won't import sugar again? And that what can we do, despite the challenges with the sugar factory, in order to process sugar in
But
Ghana?
I just have one question.
Yes.
Who is sitting? You are sitting.
But look,
You say, how can we not sit?
I don't make policy.
It can't be the two.
Oh, no,
of us.
Senior,
It's okay.
I agree. Look, one of the way of building consensus is even as we sit here. Because as we speak, Ochime is on the line, other people are watching, other people are listening, and even you, civil society like Imani, you sometimes put pressure on us to sit and talk whether we like it or not. So the conversation alone, for me, is a good start.
Agreed.
We are ready to give suggestions. We are ready to engage government. Let's try and build consensus to see where at least we can depoliticize the issues. Where we'll do the politics, we'll do it because we also want to be in government. No doubt about that. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm going to praise the MPP government or no, I'm not, because I also want to be in power. But I'm saying beyond that, there's a threshold. Beyond that threshold, it's about Ghana. We're not buying fuel. There's some of the suggestions I'm making. I'm sure if government takes them on board and it helps, it benefits all of us. Because the money I'm spending today on fuel, and MPs come under a lot of pressure. Look, anytime there's a squeeze, the first point of call, the constituents call on you. Because you went to them and they know you'll come back to them. So in winding up, there are some areas that we can look at. Especially, look, if you look at today's inflation, the biggest one is food inflation.
Yeah.
That should be worrying
And those
for
are
all of
numbers
us.
the Ghana Statistical Service
food
has
inflation,
confirmed.
if petrol, say, is it cigarettes and alcohol and the others are going up, fine. But when food prices are skyrocketing, it gives cause for worry. And we're all waiting. At least let's wait for the Monday so-called Peduase retreat.
Outcome.
I'm told that government would announce on policies. I've heard the Deputy Minister of Energy say that they're even considering 3 or 4 taxes on petroleum products. So let's see what comes out. But I also want to see the long-term issues and the medium-term ones. The short-term ones, yes, you just do that in order to hold the system. But what is our long-term vision? What's our medium-term vision as a country? Because in doing this country sector analysis, you look at where you have a comparative advantage. And then you try and push that and see how it helps the country. Thank you.
Let me come to you, Joe, for your input. Then I will talk to Dr. Japoma Jakedaku. Again, I'm coming to you on the money. We've looked at all those things. And there's a role for the Bank of Ghana to play as well. And the IEA spoke about this. And in fact, I've had people say perhaps would have been done much better if the finance ministry was run like the Bank of Ghana. I don't know what that person meant by that. But Dr. Boatis, for instance, talks about increase the policy rate, and Dr. Japoma Jakedako mentioned that I saw John nodding. Increase the policy rate by 200 basis points from 14% to 16% to stem inflation, while also increasing the attractiveness of CD-denominated assets to stem disinvestments from the money and capital markets and the negative effect on the CD. Talks about increase the primary reserve requirement from 8% to 10% to help curb liquidity creation by banks, which could fuel both inflation and exchange rate depreciation. Change the current foreign currency CD primary reserve requirement to foreign currency requirement to help boost foreign currency reserves at the Bank of Ghana. This will also meet a long-standing demand by banks. And 4, enforce foreign exchange laws more strictly, including and relating to documentation requirements for external transfers, limits on carry-on foreign currency by travelers, documentation requirements for foreign currency purchases from Forex Bureau, activities of unlicensed foreign currency dealers, pricing of goods and services in cedis and not in foreign currency, payment of services provided by Ghanaians in cedis and not foreign currency, and money laundering through banks and Forex Bureau.
But even after you come, I beg you, this issue of pricing in foreign currency, it's not as if the companies take Forex or dollars. So all they do is they convert.
The index.
The index, yeah, it's an indexation. So let's be careful as if, so that you don't go worrying businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
I would take you back to the primary reason we defined as we started this conversation for why the CD is depreciating. Right? And if we say that the CD is depreciating because there's literally a run on the CD by foreign US dollar investors in CD debt, then I ask you, in all the things you have prescribed, will that solve the problem? You see, our problem is a confidence problem. You have a run on the CD. Now, you're not going to stop that run by locking doors and sealing the gates. You can't seal it enough. You will drive it underground. You may even make it worse. If we accept that there's a confidence problem and there's a run on the CD, then we've got to fix the confidence problem. And that confidence problem, I beg to differ. That why is it that we think that it is local banks and financial institutions that all of a sudden have discovered some pot of money that was not there in December and are fueling this? You understand where I'm coming?
Yeah.
Take your average commercial bank. What has happened since December to make sure all of a sudden now there's a pot of money for which they're using to fund CDs?
It's the issue of the theory.
You see,
theoretically, people think that when there's excess money, it doesn't necessarily mean there's excess money.
That's what I try to put in. So, because again, so the issue then becomes simply asking these banks, increasing reserves, doing this, doing that, all the things we prescribed. Would that increase confidence in the CD by those who... In fact, one of the things we want to do now is to encourage people to bring back the CDs they have taken away.
The dollars.
The dollars they have taken away. Will any... Yes.
Yeah, but
let's be clear. Because I would say, unless we define the problem properly, we will be running around solving other issues. The problem now is twofold. The run on the CD has caused even local holders of CD to go and try and hold their savings in CDs. And they are hedging.
They're hedging.
Right? In fact, guess what? Your financial institutions will soon start suffering.
Why?
Oh, yes, because if I have a fixed deposit at, even say, take my own institution, which is a high rate fixed deposit at 19% per annum. And in 3 months, 19% per annum means in a quarter, divide that by 4. That's the earnings I've made.
And the CDR depreciation.
And the CDR is degraded by already 30%.
Inflation is 15.
You see, so that situation is going to actually create a liquidity crash for financial institutions. So telling the situation inherently creates a liquidity a crunch for financial institutions. Making that liquidity crunch worse doesn't solve the problem.
And don't forget, as you guys have pointed out,
the problem, I beg to differ, is not with the
interest rates on US Treasuries
it's not with the central
rise.
bank. The central bank hasn't done a lot wrong in this case. The problem is about confidence in the Ghanaian economy and Ghana's economic management. Restore that confidence and things will improve. It's like we could even decide that we want to fix the dollar to CD rate. We can do that. What happens? Drive everything underground, make it a lot worse, and create issues for people to make horrendous amounts of profiteering, diverting official sources to underground resources. We don't want to go any of that route. That's not the solution, because that was not what the problem was in the first place.
Mr. Chawaji.
Well, I think the discussion has been quite good, and going to IMF or not, I believe we have what it takes. We know some of the prescriptions in the IMF in the past, and I'm sure we can start doing some of the solution ourselves. I mean, the platform that you created today, the suggestions that are all coming, are some of the things that you go to IMF you have to do. So, I think for me that shouldn't be immediate. I support the fact that if we really want to discipline ourselves to do the right things, maybe then you have to go to IMF. So maybe we have to discipline ourselves on those standards. I just want to correct something that my honorable colleague just said, that I consider free senior high school consumption, investment versus consumption. And so in terms of the budget classification, you may put those expenditure items into goods and services, which makes it consumption. But in terms of what is being done, to me, investing in human resource for the country is an investment, regardless of how you consider it by way of budget, but by way of budget classification. And I say this because when I was in Parliament, I think somewhere in 2019 or so, I had opportunity to lead a team of accountants, chartered accountants in the Finance Committee, to go to the World Global Conference for Accountants in Sydney, Australia. And one of the countries that's well with its public accounting, the whole world, is Japan. Japan, when we had a section, Japan was saying that investment in raising human resources from kindergarten to the university, whatever money they put in there, they classify that in their balance sheet as investment.
Okay.
All right. So the classification may be wrong, but if you're going by good practices, and that is the angle from which I come, right, it isn't because of how we classify it here. Because there's no way I'm going to consider buying booze, buying whatever, those things as basically investment items when I know that Ghana will classify it as capital expenditure. Of course, you are looking at concrete, but I'm looking at people like you and I. My uncle borrowed from Ghana Commercial Bank to take care of me. What do you think I've become today? Wasn't that investment? So it's relative. It depends on how you are looking at it. And then my friend also talks about the fact that, yes, and I think we profess a lot of good suggestions here. Yes, if you are broke, you don't do a number of things. You cut expenditure, you don't drink tea, maybe you drink dudu, whatever they call it. You don't. So if you are broke, you have to manage. I agree. I support that position totally. You cut expenditure to the extent that you can, the ones that are easy to cut, you cut. But if you're also broke, look for alternative ways of getting supplementary income. If you have one job that doesn't pay you well, look for a second job to complement what you have. And that's why people work abroad, they do 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever they do. So revenue, we should also be looking at revenue. As we control the leakages, as we cut expenditure, as we deal with corruption, immediately what can we do on the revenue side? And I totally agree with my honorable colleague as well on the fact that we have to make decisions. But you have to support us. We have to make decisions. But we cannot do it alone. We have to support us. Opposition has to be responsible. We made a decision to get e-levy. It's bitter. It's not the best. Taxation in times of crisis or in terms of economic depression or whatever it is not the solution. But government has to function. How do you pay for your debt? You on one side, I don't mean to be too political. On one side, some Ghanaians are saying, don't tax Ghanaians. On another side, we are looking for development. How do you pay for it? Don't borrow, don't tax. How do you pay for it? You don't want us to borrow. Our revenue is insufficient, at least in the short term. How do you finance it? When you come to private sector, when you are sick, when your country is sick, when your company is dying, the immediate thing to do is not to put money in building houses or building offices, right? When you are sick and you don't even know what tomorrow holds for you, you don't do concrete works. You solve the problem, you save lives. So it's a matter of choice. Now we are in economic difficulty. We need to do something that will at least stabilize the economy before we start thinking. So everything, and I totally believe this, everything is not about infrastructure, even though to me it is so critical for economic development. But we got to see beyond that. And so all the suggestions that are coming forward, I agree. Immediately, government has to look at its taxes on petroleum products. Because I can give you an example. I run transport business where government gave us opportunity to increase fuel prices from, I think, from about by 13% or so. So one, just to give you a practical example, if you go to Kumasi and Accra, you get about 700 cedis, 14 people times 50, 700 cedis. So the government gives us an opportunity to increase. So it went up to 60 by 14 gives you 840. But guess what the increase is? When we used to get 700 cedis in revenue, the cost of fuel was about 400 cedis. So 300 cedis becomes gross profit to pay everything else. Now, government has increased the fuel price, the fare by 10 cedis if you wish, giving us 840. But now we have to use fuel of 600 cedis. That is quite a tough situation for businesses. So if the government is looking at the taxes on fuel, which also, if you don't help, if you don't subsidize, it's going to trigger a lot of things where cassava will be brought from wherever it is coming from because of transport is sold at a higher price. You are talking about food inflation. Those are the costs. The cost of transporting these food items have become so expensive that everybody is increasing their price, hence inflation. And you say food inflation in Accra, for instance, is 19%. That has a cost. The government is supposed to support. Yet, government is broke. We've confessed. Government is broke. We are not going to run away from the difficulties. For me, the hope is that we understand the issues and we will respond. But given the parliament we have today, we cannot continue to be doing pull here, and the Ghana stands in the middle. We are not going anywhere. Somebody has to make a tough decision, and the tough decision requires support from both sides. And let's not choose our political interests. Of course, you want to be in power. Yeah, and you're hoping so. My prayer is that you don't come to power now because we know your history. Okay? That's my prayer. Because we can do it better compared to what you have done. However, sometimes you have to go beyond the politics and put kind of fish. I'm glad you are saying that you're buying for. I used to buy for 400 cedis between Kumasi and Accra when I was MP in Banjima. Today I buy 900 cedis. My Nissan petrol. So what happens? I drive my Toyota. So as individuals, we have to begin to rationalize our spending. What do we have to do for the country? Look for more money, cut expenditure. So I agree on all those expenditure cut policies that you are suggesting. The same way, we have to look for revenue, my brother, so that when people are in trouble, the government can assist.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel Ochem Abuaje, transport owner and accountant, but formerly member of parliament for Bantama and a member of the finance committee of parliament. Let me talk to Dr. Japoma Jeke Daku again. Dr. Jeke Daku, listening to my panelists, so what we require from the government now, good behavior, some form to find confidence.
Discipline.
Yes, good behavior, discipline. Okay, so good behavior, how to find discipline, and also sparking a stagnant economy. But I want to ask you one question, though. Since the big problem also has to do with the currency and this whole conversation about the benchmark value, because I expect that to be one of the outcomes that we will hear from this PEDASI meeting on Monday, because the government is stuck in the middle. It does not know whether to go forward or to go backwards with this, because if it encourages importers, you still have a run on the dollar. The industrialists are also saying, well, we require space to be able to work. Looking at these things that I have outlined, good behavior, confidence, and then, basically support the government needs to do. And then I also want to hear your thoughts on this whole benchmark value conversation. You can start from the benchmark value for me.
Okay.
So what is benchmark? The ports.
Yes.
Okay.
Please go on.
Okay, so we've heard a lot this morning. We've heard a lot about being prudent. We've also heard quite a lot about trying to mobilize enough revenue here. We see that we are all feeling the pinch as far as the currency depreciation is concerned, and therefore we need to be able to take certain measures to ensure that we get our city back on track. Regarding the benchmark values that you have just spoken about, I am tempted to say that in the interim, whilst we are struggling and trying to put measures in place to ensure that our economy gets on track, we can sort of do away with it so that we can raise some revenue from that. I know that it's going to be hurting our importers to some extent, but I think that it's important for all of us to understand the crisis that we find ourselves in and then try to get out of this crisis. And then re-establish some of the freebies that we were having initially. Now, with regards to some of the things that we can do as far as our currency is concerned, we know that the issues that we've always had with our exchange rate or our cedi depreciating has been the issue of structural bottlenecks that we have in our economy. And if we need to change that situation, it's important that we try to put measures in place to change the structure of the economy, and that's on a longer term basis. But in the interim, as I already stated, it's important I know that the central bank has done very well in managing our affairs. They've tried to bring the interest rates down through their monetary policy rate, etc. But it's important that we look at the central bank again. We are expecting that by the time they are announcing their decision next week, we hope that they will be able to inch the monetary policy rate up a bit, because we shouldn't forget that US is going to be increasing its interest rates if it hasn't done that already. And looking at our situation, we need to do it in such a way that our assets will become more attractive, or our assets will become relatively attractive, so that we can get the confidence coming back. So Dr. Joe Jackson, if you are worrying about investor confidence, which I know we should all worry about now, because that's what we need to restore that confidence to be able to get our exchange rate on track. Then obviously, one of the things that we are expecting to see is that the central bank would come up with some inch up of its interest rates, so that our assets would become sort of attractive for the outside world, or even domestically, we try to purchase our own assets. Now, that brings in inflows and that helps our currency to stabilize. So that's one way. And another thing that we should also try to do as a country is that we should try and enforce our regulations. We have regulations actually governing the exchange rate market. And the reason why speculators are having their way is because some of the things are a bit loose for them. If you go to countries like Kenya, if you go to a country like South Africa, it's very difficult for you to be able to engage as a speculator. Certain documents are required for you to get a foreign currency. We know that we have those regulations in Ghana. I think that we have to do more with the enforcement of the regulations so that the speculators don't get their way. And so that's another thing that we can look at. And then
Doc, if you can just help me out on this, and we've heard that a lot, and just for the benefit of my audience, we've heard a lot of talk about the impact of speculators on the currency. If you can explain a bit in simple language for our listeners what you mean by speculators. Yes.
Okay, I'll try and do it in simple language. So in every society, people just try to benefit from some distortions or some frictions that we see in the economy. And it's only rational that if people see that the currency is depreciating, they rush more for the dollars. So they, for instance, if I'm using dollar as a foreign currency, they rush more for the dollar. And then once they are demanding, because the exchange rate market has to do with demand and supply, right? So once you find that more people are demanding more of the foreign currency, you see that the price of the foreign currency goes up and you see an appreciation of the foreign currency as against your domestic currency. And so that's rational behavior, and that's what speculators will thrive on. And we as Mr. Joe Jackson and Honorable Jinapor and all the other speakers have seen, we are here mainly, one main reason has been because of the downgrade. Because as for the Chinese New Year problem and then the repatriation issues, if we take a look at our data, we obviously would see that at the beginning of every year, we tend to see some problems with our currency in a way. But we are here mainly because of the downgrade. And the downgrade actually caused a lot of capital to fly out of the country. And that worsened our situation that we were facing. And so once that happened and people saw that the currency was depreciating, then what would speculators do? They'll try and get more of the dollars because now there's a great incentive to be holding the dollars. It's more profitable to have your investment in the dollars. So they try to hold more of the dollars. And once they are demanding more of the dollars, it goes on to fuel into the depreciation that you're already seeing or exhibiting, and that depreciates your currency further. And that's why we say that exchange rate has the exchange rate market in itself has a self-fulfilling prophecy that if people believe that the currency is going to be depreciating, then their actions will cause the currency to depreciate the more. So the reason I am talking here about regulation is that regulation would stop the activities of these speculators.
Okay.
Once we're able to enforce, so I'm not saying the rules are not there. We do have the rules. I see that the central bank is making some attempt or has been making some attempt to ensure now if you want foreign currency and you go to the bank, you have to present a lot of the documentations to ensure that you are going to be using it for the things that you have said that you are going to be using it for. It's very difficult for you to now walk to the bank to take foreign currency. But we have to be watching the Forex bureaus. We need to ensure that the Forex bureaus are abiding by the regulations that govern the foreign exchange market. People who don't submit sufficient documentation are not giving the currency. I mean, in South Africa, it's very difficult for you. They even make it unattractive for you to want a foreign currency. And those are the things that we need to ensure that we have put in place, and those are really governing our exchange rate market. Now, for those who need the foreign currency, because you can find importers as well who don't need the foreign currency now, but because they want to hedge against the depreciation of the currency, they walk into the forex bureaus, or maybe they walk into the banks and they try to do to take the foreign currency and hope that they would hedge against any further depreciation. Those ones we need to also tackle, because we need to ensure that those traders who don't immediately need the foreign currency to be able to carry out their trade would not be in a position where they would be able to get the foreign currency. And the banks can even carry out the transactions. So for those who need it immediately, to ensure that we are giving the foreign currency to them, the banks can carry out the transactions for them. So this is my take.
All right, thank you very much on that, Dr. Japoma Chekado. I really appreciate your explanation on the speculators, because we've seen a lot of that in the media space. Franklin?
Yes.
Final words on this.
Well, first of all, I mean, this benchmark values thing, data must speak to the matter, really. The fact of the matter is that if your economy is not able to withstand the demand, then it means you may have to be careful how you introduce a policy that somehow raising what you perceive to be a revenue, gainer. So for me, I like to speak to the data, because it's not automatic that once we reverse the benchmark values, then all of a sudden domestic production would grow and meet up with the rising demand. I think it's important we take our time to do the analysis. As for the currency issues, I'm tempted to believe that maybe we should allow the CD to find its level. At the end of the day,
really?
Well, we've been trying time with that number, trying to resuscitate the CD through prayer and some other interventions as well, but they never really work. In fact, I'm a student of the liberal economic order, and I don't believe in currency, should I say, interventions to rein in the currencies, because they never work. They've never have worked. They are not sustainable. The best you can do is to set up a committee to investigate why the CD is behaving the way it's behaving against other currencies, which I was part of. I mean, our mandate was to investigate the CD and find out why the issues were the way they were. And clearly, the rationale, or should I say, the conclusions are not different from what my friends on the show have said. Your inability to build an economic structure that enables you to have, for a currency to be strong, ultimately is the reason. So for me, I think, yes, we should, it's good to be saying that there are speculators, and there are speculators in every market. I've seen in the West, there are people who trade in currencies, but never it is the case that the currency in the West is always under stress because of speculators. Maybe we need to find out the number of speculators that are so and that are so endowed that they can, by their actions, collapse the currency. I think we should be able to understand that the dynamics of a currency depreciation is also a function of the overall economic structure. And once you try to do that by trying to rein it in, it never really works. The last of these examples was in Turkey. I'm sure you know the story of Turkey, where the president wanted a certain outcome. Anytime he tried firing one person, including his own in-law, the currency took a mind of its own. So eventually, you would realize that it's the economic policy making decision making in an economy, the sound public policy that eventually leads to stabilization of an economy, including its currency as well.
All right, thank you, Franklin. Let me just take some messages and take a quick break, and then we'll wrap up the big issue for today. So, Kwekula Paz is saying, Godfred, why can't banks which hold foreign currency accounts pay interest? That allows foreigners to save foreign currency in the banks. Okay. Richard Lawe from the Central Region, Bremen Asukuma, says, in Ghana politics, if you are seeing red things, they will tell you the thing is white. That's why the Ghanaian economy is struggling. The economy needs a genuine advisor, because if you look at the free SHS policy, for instance, it has quite a few problems with it. AU Farouk says, good morning. Seriously, the government's economic management team has wasted resources. They have not brought new growth to the economy. Kipo from the Savannah region, Tuna, says all these problems have come about because of a lack of a national agenda. We have been plunged into this because a party wants to make a name. Now we are all in trouble. Good morning, host and your team. The government in general should be ready to listen to all these suggestions and the way forward for us to regain our economy, for us to regain our economic life. In fact, things are getting really, really hard. This says this particular one. We'll take a quick break. When we return, Tomami here will close the big issue for today.
Tell them I'm not in, eh? Tell them. When you evade taxes, you put yourself at risk of prosecution. Do the right thing. Pay your duties and taxes online, through the bank, or from your phone on time. And let's build a great nation.
And we are back on just a quick update. I'm just checking Asase Radio's website, and they are saying that they are reporting that the cabinet has decided to ease the restriction on land borders and easing of restrictions at the airports as well. So perhaps, and apparently the president will address the nation this weekend from this story, looking at what I'm reading. So we'll look forward to that. John, maybe you'll get the update you are looking for this weekend. Toma.
Yes, sir.
Wrap us up.
Okay, here we go. Finally, Doc was just talking about this issue of speculation leading to the depreciation of the cedi. The fact is that what is happening to the cedi now is not so much speculation as people who I didn't say sensibly running for their lives, or just to say people are just trying to make the most, what they regard to be the most prudent economic decision. Yes, there used to be a lot of speculation in the cedi back in them days, but since the Bank of Ghana introduced forward options, all right, where you have price discovery, where you know what people expect to pay for a dollar, say 60 days from now, 75 days from now. It took the rug from under the feet of speculators. What is going on now is just as Joe and Honorable have said. The fact is that people have lost confidence in the city. So people are converting money to dollars and running away. And that is the issue that has to be solved. Please, let me just do, last thing I will say is, we need to be careful about how we go about restoring confidence. Remember what happened in 2013, 2014, when Harry Wampa was Bank of Ghana governor, when he thought it
backfired.
Right by putting in so many measures to prevent people from using foreign exchange in the wrong way. But what he simply did was to create panic among people. And in fact, that you always know that people who break the law, they're always ahead of the people who are there to uphold the law. So what happened was that the people who could break the law quickly went in and changed all their money to dollars and put them around. We got 10% depreciation first half of the year. So we need to be careful about how we're going about restoring confidence. Let's not adopt what people will interpret to be panic measures. It's going to backfire against us.
1 minute. You see, one thing we are failing to realize is also the issue of confidence. If you read about Reagan and post-Great Depression, the American economy was just not picking up. And so I think that leadership also must send some signal. I've been expecting to hear from the Vice President and the economic management team. In difficult times like this, when people are panicking, and especially in the world of finance, what you don't want is panic. If there's panic and they run on Mr. Jackson's bank, no matter the buffers he have, is likely to collapse. If there's panic and people are hoarding dollars, because you normally keep currency for three main things, either for transaction, speculation, or transaction. Now, I don't even see the issue of speculation. My worry is that people are now rushing to convert their cedis into dollars because it's a precautionary measure. At least if I won't get anything, the value of my money should be restored or secured. But if you keep cedis, look, I wanted a vehicle last week. When I checked the price, and 1 week after delaying because I needed to mobilize, I couldn't go back again because the value had jumped so much so I think government also should be looking at sending the right signals. And like my good friend just said, in your attempt to correct these distortions, you ought to be very, very careful not to exacerbate it. Other than that, it creates a lot of problems. So then one last comment on the benchmark values. It ought to be selective. We don't produce sugar. Yeah. So if you decide that you put taxes on sugar because you want to raise revenue, you're punishing the consumer. Yeah. Or, excuse me, maybe you don't produce rice. Rice is a staple. Or you don't have enough production. You put a huge tax on rice without putting some incentive for the importation of, say, tractors and stuff that will help production. So you have to balance it. It shouldn't just be about revenue. It should be what is the end game. So if I want to put taxes on rice, I'm probably taking away benchmark values on tractor, on other equipment, fertilizer and stuff, so that the local farmer will be competitive. I think if we do that, it may help. Thank you very much. And on that note, we'll wrap up this weekend's episode, the economic episode of the big issue. I hope you enjoyed it. A big thank you to Joe Jackson, spending his weekend with us, the Member of Parliament for Yape Kusogu, John Jinapor, Toma Mihia, financial analyst, Dr. Japuma Jakedaku from the University of Ghana Business School, the former Member of Parliament for Bantama, Daniel Ochem, Abuaji also joined us, and of course Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa. My name, Godfrey Akoto Boafo. Have a good weekend.